Chapter 382. Staya heaved a sigh of relief when she heard that Jilin didn't object. It was the best news as long as there were no problems within the human race. From the long history, the biggest crisis in the world usually came from within the human race. Then it's settled, Staya said. Don't forget to inform Flay. Don't worry, Jilin said. Huh? Jilin suddenly exclaimed softly. He suddenly raised his head and looked in the direction of the crater. Staya was shocked. She had never seen Jilin look so serious. Staya followed Jilin's gaze. She wanted to see what could attract Jilin's attention. The sky was silent. It was still vast and quiet. There was nothing unusual. Staya wasn't surprised. She knew that she couldn't see anything unusual because she couldn't see as far as Jilin. Something was coming, but she couldn't see it yet. Jilin still raised his head and looked to the north. His gaze didn't move. He was really focused. After a while, Staya finally saw a flash of light in the sky. It was a sparkling dot. It was like a shining star in the daytime. Even the sun couldn't cover its brilliance. It was like a comet falling towards them. The comet drew a long trajectory and accurately landed at the crater. It landed in front of Staya and Jilin. Walala. The comet in the sky wasn't a physical object. It was a pure and enormous ball of ice energy. But the moment it landed, it created a huge ice pillar and instantly blocked the crater. Staya was shocked. She wondered what was going on. Who would throw such a huge block of ice? But the ice didn't have any energy waves. It was just a normal block of ice. It couldn't hurt Jilin. No, it was hard to hurt her, let alone Jilin. The appearance of this piece of ice had only one purpose, and that was to enrage Jilin. Staya glanced at Jilin's expression. She felt that if the person who threw the ice cube really wanted to anger Jilin, he had undoubtedly succeeded. It's the Demon King. Jilin narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice. His voice was slightly cold, but there were golden flames rising in his eyes. What is the meaning of this, Demon King? How did he know about you? Existences at our level are as conspicuous as torches in the dark night. There are only 3 or 4 torches in the night sky. How could he not notice them? As for what it means, it's obvious that it's a provocation. How is it? You've already been bullied at your doorstep. It's not in your character to not fight back, right? Should we work together with the humans? Staya smiled. She felt that this was her chance. No need. Jilin glanced at Staya. I've already been bullied to this extent. How can I wait for you humans? Jilin turned into his human form after he finished speaking. A pair of wings appeared on his back. He spat out a small ball of fire and instantly melted the huge ice cube. The ice cube turned into water. The moment it fell into the lava below, a large amount of white steam rose up. Staya felt a strong wind blowing up from below. She was standing in the wind. Staya took out her holy sword and stabbed it into the ground to stabilize herself. White steam rose up around her. She couldn't see anything. When the steam dissipated, Staya was finally sure that Jilin had left. Staya stomped her foot angrily. She felt that Jilin was still brainless. How could he rush into someone's nest just because they provoked him? He must have prepared everything and set up a trap. He was just waiting for you to fall into it. But on second thought, Staya was not so anxious anymore. Perhaps Jilin wasn't wrong. Even if he had set up an inescapable net and set up an ambush on all sides. So what? Even if they fought, it would only be a battle between Jilin and the Demon King. Just like the battle between the humans and Jilin. There were more than 1 million lions on both sides. But when Jilin and the third prince started fighting, everyone could only watch. They couldn't do anything even if they wanted to. But she didn't expect that even Jilin was so angry. He still remembered to turn into his human form and not expose her. Staya was silent for a moment. Then she turned and walked out. She wanted to discuss the god-slaying cannon with the Dwarf King. Jilin flew into the sky and shot out like lightning. He flew across the ground at a speed that was as fast as light. In the blink of an eye, he flew past the Saimai Empire, the Middle Empire, and the Snow Wind Empire. After rushing out of the border of the Snow Wind Empire, Jilin flew for half a day at this speed. Then he saw a somewhat stupid creature on the top of a snowy mountain that reached into the clouds. The Demon King. Jilin knew that this creature was the Demon King from thousands of miles away, but he was still stunned when he saw it with his own eyes. Because this creature broke Jilin's inherent impression of the Demon King. It was a creature about the size of a human. No, it looked exactly like a human. There was no crown, no ferocious fangs and claws, and no black cloak. There were no black and red flames on his body. Not only that, he didn't even have a piece of clothing on him. He stood in the wind and snow in the knife-like high altitude. His upper body was bare, and his feet were bare. He only had a pair of worn-out trousers on him. At this temperature and altitude, if a human stood here dressed like this, theoretically, they could last at most an hour. But in reality, it would take less than 5 minutes for a human to see God. But this Demon King, not only did he not have the slightest discomfort, his expression was one of enjoyment. Just like a human bathing in the spring breeze, he also looked like a pervert. If there was a clear difference between the Demon King and a human, it would be the color of their skin. The Demon King's skin was dark blue from head to toe, and the Demon King's appearance could be said to be perfect. To be able to easily throw away the third prince, who was a handsome man in the eyes of humans by a few streets. This was the only creature that Jilin had ever seen that could stand on the same level as the Elf Queen in terms of appearance. Although it was slightly inferior, it was not far off. How can the dignified Demon King be so shabby? Jilin landed on the ground and stood in front of the Demon King. Between you and me, there's no need to talk about ostentation, right? The Demon King smiled generously. With his invincible appearance, in this world of ice and snow, his smile really gave off the feeling of spring in March. Jilin was stunned. He could understand why the Demon King was so familiar with him, even though it was the first time they met. Most high-level creatures of the same level were like this. They put on airs outside, making low-level creatures revere them like gods. But in front of each other, they could reveal their true selves. So even if they were hostile to each other and fought to the death, they would still exchange pleasantries. This showed that this was a battle of the great Tao, and there was no personal grudge. But he could not understand why the Demon King's attitude was so friendly. He was the one who provoked him first. I didn't expect that the first true dragon I saw after waking up would be like this. The Demon King looked at Jilin and felt a little strange. Logically speaking, dragons were full of pride about their bodies. Although they had the ability to change their appearance, they would not do so easily. What do you mean by throwing ice at my house? Jilin said in a deep voice. Jilin took a step forward. With the step, even the cold wind seemed to become colder. For a moment, swords were drawn. Chapter 383. The space at the top of the snow mountain was not that big. At most, it was less than 500 meters long. As for Jilin and the Demon King, the distance between them was naturally even closer. This little distance was like nothing to them. They both had the ability to attack the other instantly. Therefore, Jilin's step had no practical meaning. He was just showing an aggressive attitude. The Demon King stared blankly for a moment before bursting into laughter. Then, he bowed to Jilin in a meticulous manner. Now, it was Jilin's turn to be flustered. There was a saying, "Do not hit a smiling person." He finally understood what it meant. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you," the Demon King said gently. "I just wanted to see you." "See me? What are you trying to say?" Jilin was even more confused. "It's nothing important. I just wanted to express my gratitude to you." "Gratitude?" "Yes, when you came to the tundra, you melted the ice and released me. Have you forgotten?" Jilin's eyes widened instantly. He remembered. When he first came out from a Middle Empire's Qianquan world, he was transported to that vast hospital. He flew from there for 9 days and 9 nights before returning to human land. And he vaguely remembered that he had melted a bit of the ice, and there were many humanoid creatures under the ice. He thought they were all dead, but Jilin still did not believe it. He did not believe that his luck was that good. The blue creatures under the ice were as numerous as the carp in the river. They were all over the tundra, and he just released one of them to be the Demon King. There are so many people under the ice, and I just released one of them to be the Demon King. That's too much of a coincidence. First of all, I'm not some demon king. We're not demons, we're humans. Of course, if it's you, you can call me whatever you want. The demon king shrugged. As for your question, it's very simple. It's not that you released the demon king. It's that the first one to break through the ice was the demon king. What does that mean? The god of darkness broke through the layers of obstacles and hurriedly arrived in this world. He casually bestowed upon me the supreme divine power. Since I am outside the ice layer, I will naturally benefit more than my fellow clansmen under the ice layer. Jilin gently nodded. He understood. This demon king is really a humble guy, Jilin thought. Although the demon king spoke casually, Jilin still caught the details that the demon king didn't mention. The first to break through the layer of ice would be the demon king. This was clearly a method of selection, as well as a method of competition for the demon gods. In the beginning, all the demon gods must have been at the bottom of the ice. However, they were able to struggle little by little in the shackles of the ice, and the guy in front of him was clearly the fastest and highest existence among the demon gods. Because the ice that Jilin melted back then was not deep enough, and only one escaped, it was enough to show that even without Jilin, this guy was still one of the best in the entire demon god clan. It was unintentional. You don't have to worry about it, Jilin said. As for you saying that you are humans, yes, we are true humans. True humans. Jilin was somewhat speechless. Although you're very similar to the humans I know, to be honest, you're still far from it. They're not humans. The Demon King naturally knew what Jilin was talking about. These fellows who are flaunting their prowess in the world are not humans at all. They are just a bunch of despicable, cunning, and sycophantic usurpers. In the years when we called ourselves humans, how could these lowly life forms dare to raise their heads to look at us? Then why are all of you under the ice? Jilin had indeed learned a lot from Aisha over the years. He touched a sore spot and could infuriate someone to death. Even the Demon King, who appeared to be well-mannered and had the demeanor of a true aristocrat, was stabbed by this sudden sentence that was as sharp as a knife. Jilin seemed to have suddenly struck out with his saber without any warning, but struck the Demon King's Achilles heel. The Demon King composed himself and calmed down. Because we were careless. Jilin nodded and thought to himself that all the failures in the world could be attributed to these three words. The megalosaurus that soars above the 9 heavens should also be careful of the poisonous snakes hiding in the sewers. The Demon King looked at the snowy sky and sighed. It's just that we didn't take the poisonous snakes seriously at that time. Jilin thought to himself, what kind of analogy is this? The megalosaurus should be careful of snakes? And the snakes in the sewers. Why didn't I know? So, you want revenge? Jilin asked. No. The Demon King shook his head. The king of the past has returned to the top of the world. In the face of disobedience, what he wants to do is not revenge, but judgment. Jilin looked at the Demon King speechlessly and thought to himself, what an idiot. Ahem. Jilin coughed twice and sorted out his thoughts. What exactly are you going to do? Kill all disobedience and take back the name of humans. You want to kill all humans. We are the humans, but you understand what I mean. As long as they are humans, don't like them. The Dragon Clan has always been like this, but since you said so, then let me ask why? Because as long as they are humans, they will cause great damage to the world. In these years, for their own development, humans have cut down mountains and forests, opened up land, and built cities, causing countless creatures to be homeless. They use fire wantonly, but they can't control it, causing countless lives to be swallowed by the flames. An out-of-control mountain fire can turn the lives of an entire mountain into inedible roasted meat. They change the landscape, rivers, and mountains according to their will, but they are not spared, causing other lives to be displaced and the earth to be devastated. But humans are never ashamed of it. Instead, they are proud of it. They admire such behavior. Humans have a story called The Foolish Old Man Moving the Mountain. It's about a human called the Foolish Old Man. Because a mountain blocked the road to the village, he wanted to dig up the entire mountain. The Demon King was stunned. Why didn't he move? Or move the entire village? Wouldn't that save more trouble? How would I know? Jilin said angrily. Oh, the Demon King apologized for interrupting Jilin. Please continue. The foolish old man wanted to dig up the mountain, but the mountain god who represents all the creatures on the mountain naturally disagreed, because this is their home that they have lived in for countless years. The Demon King nodded repeatedly, thinking that what Jilin said made sense. If Staya was here, she would have a different opinion, but unfortunately, she was not here. What a good mountain god. He stood up for the animals on the mountain and didn't use the power of the mountain god to smash the foolish old man to death when he was digging up the mountain. In human terms, he could be called a person with both benevolence and righteousness. But in the human story, this mountain god is a negative character, infinitely vilified. Those weak creatures always have the ability to confuse right and wrong. What happened at the end of the story? In the end, the foolish old man said, "There will be countless descendants, which successfully move the heavens." The heavens sent 2 heavenly gods down to help the foolish old man move the mountain away. The Demon King suddenly became silent for a long time. He looked up at the sky and took a deep breath. In the end, the story of the heavenly gods descending to the mortal world and helping the humans move the mountain made him fall into a trap. He felt the same way. Countless years ago, when those weak creatures faced their own race, it was like a man facing a huge mountain. They were powerless and could not lift their heads. In the end, didn't the gods step in and help those despicable creatures move the mountain that was their own race? The Demon King believed that the foolish old man's real purpose was not to move the mountain at all. He just wanted to act pitiful in front of the gods and gain their sympathy. Just like what those people did countless years ago, the Demon King suddenly clenched his fists and a cold wind suddenly rose around him. It was countless times colder than a natural wind and snow between heaven and earth. Chapter 384. The chilly wind around the Demon King was as bone-chilling as the chilly wind blowing from the depths of hell. Even Jilin felt a chill run down his spine. Jilin's golden dragon eyes flashed with a golden light, and flames rose from his body with a whoosh. Thus, all the wind, snow, and chill between heaven and earth could no longer get within 3 meters of Jilin. The Demon King sensed the flames on Jilin's body and instantly came to his senses, withdrawing the chilly air. "Sorry, your story was so good that I got a little carried away." The Demon King smiled apologetically. "It's fine, but you seem to have a lot of emotions. It's just some memories of the past. It's not worth mentioning." The Demon King spread his hands. "But in the years that we've been asleep, the crimes that humans have committed are too numerous to be recorded. It seems like you don't like the way humans do things. How about it? Do you want to join us? If you and I join forces, we can easily destroy any enemy in this world." "Is that so?" Jilin did not deny it. Putting aside the fact that there was no such thing as true trust between the two of them, even if they could fight side by side without holding back, Crimson Lyn didn't want to fight the Elven Queen with this Demon King. But if such a day really came, Jilin only hoped that he would be the one to run away quickly. Jilin's attitude stunned the Demon King. "Do you think there's a creature in this world that we can't defeat, even if we join forces? Let's not talk about that for now. If you don't provoke her, she won't come out to attack you," Jilin said. "What I mean is I won't stand on your side or the human side, because it's the same to me no matter who's on the side. Then what's your goal? Or what's the goal of the Dragon Clan? That can wait until you've killed all the humans." "Oh, so you won't stand on the side of those rebels, right?" "Of course." "Good. Then please enjoy the show of genocide." The Demon King raised his hands. His voice was exaggerated and full of enthusiasm, just like a human stage actor. The biggest variable in this world no longer existed. The Demon King was in a very good mood. Jilin looked at the somewhat neurotic Demon King and did not doubt that it would be a good show. As long as one was a human, they would be able to play the role of genocide very well. Because in this aspect, human was an expert and was very familiar with it. They have lives. When will you make your move? The true human race's return to the world stage requires a grand opening. Jilin understood. This guy still wanted to prepare properly. It sounded like it would take a lot of time, but it wasn't too surprising. This guy looked like an artistic youth who liked this kind of style. The opening of such a big show naturally had to be announced. About 30 days later, the Demon King still gave a rough time. Jilin was the only person in the world who was qualified to watch this show. The Demon King did not want him to accidentally fall asleep and miss the show. All right, Jilin nodded. Maybe it's just an unnecessary move, but I'll kindly remind you not to underestimate those people. Oh, the Demon King clicked his tongue in wonder. I didn't expect that the dragon race, who only has eyes above the clouds, would actually say such words. But I'll say it again. We are the real humans. There's no difference. In my eyes, you are all humans. The only difference might be the color. Jilin said, "Be careful. The current humans are really troublesome. I don't want you to be careless and end the show before it fully unfolds." "Don't worry," the Demon King said. "By the way, if you really exterminate the human race with your physique, how are you going to get along with other races?" Jilin had long noticed that there was an extremely cold aura corroding the surroundings around the Demon King. If not for Jilin being here, any other living being would have already been frozen solid. "What other races?" The Demon King frowned, his face filled with confusion. Understood. Jilin was enlightened. He thought to himself that he had been careless. With his physique, there was no way he could get along with other races. Everywhere he went, rivers would be frozen, mountains would be sealed by snow. This guy probably had never seen other living beings before. This true human was even more human than human. Jilin sighed. He took out the dragon scale sword and transformed back into his dragon form. A gigantic, red megalosaurus suddenly appeared on the peak of the mountain. He was even bigger than the peak of the mountain. In the wind and snow, his body was emitting scorching flames. The red greatsword in his hand was a true greatsword, even for someone of his size. That sword was obviously a peerless weapon. Just its appearance alone was enough to make people tremble in fear. It seemed like it could cut the mountain in half. "Now that we're done with the greetings and business, shall we?" Jilin made an inviting gesture. "Sure." The Demon King happily agreed. Red Dragon Palace's 20th floor. A world filled with fire and iron. Staya was chatting with the Dwarf King in front of a huge forging furnace. The Dwarf King looked impatient. It was as if a bug had just flown into his mouth, and he was waiting for Staya to leave so he could spit it out. Although the Dwarf King's impatience was written all over his face, Staya didn't care about the atmosphere at all. She was still talking about how it was right for the dwarves to lend the humans the god-killing cannon. The Dwarf King didn't immediately use the god-killing cannon to attack Staya. Instead, he controlled his temper. It seemed like he was giving Jilin face. One by one, the works of the dwarves passed by the Dwarf King like flowing water. If the Dwarf King didn't say anything, the product would really pass by like flowing water. If the Dwarf King raised his head and glanced at the dwarf holding the product, it meant that the product wasn't good enough and had to be remade. The war between the humans and Jilin is already over. Why are the dwarves still making so many weapons? Staya asked. "I don't know," the Dwarf King said. "I don't know why you work so hard. What are you talking about? As long as there are enough raw materials and high-temperature flames, it's the dwarves' wish to keep forging." "What?" Staya gave in. What else could she say to a race that was born to work without complaint? The Dwarf King suddenly paused. He put his hand on his shiny earrings and seemed to be listening for something. "Jilin is back. He asked us to go over," the Dwarf King said seriously to Staya. Staya suddenly became nervous. She didn't know what happened, but the Dwarf King's expression seemed to say something big happened. The two hurried down and arrived at the Red Palace. When the two of them arrived, Jilin was lying on top of the Golden Mountain. He looked exactly the same as before and didn't look any different. However, Staya and the Dwarf King looked at each other. They both sensed that something was wrong with Jilin. "You're here." Jilin raised his head and looked at the Dwarf King. "How many god-killing cannons do we have now?" 13. The Dwarf King didn't know why Jilin suddenly asked this, but he still answered in a hurry. Staya heard this and was shocked. In just 2 years, The dwarves had 8 more god-killing cannons. Lin Staya 3, Jilin said calmly. Chapter 385. Lin Staya, 3 cannons. Staya and the Dwarf King were both stunned. But it was the Dwarf King who reacted first. Sure, even though he was very unwilling, the Dwarf King still had to give face to Jilin. The dwarf race was first saved by Jilin and avoided being exterminated. Then they moved to Mount Gerda and were taken in by Jilin. Although they helped Jilin make many products during this period of time, it was the dwarf race's wish, so it was nothing. For such a long time, Jilin did not ask for any reward, nor did he make any requests, which made the dwarf race feel uncomfortable. Now that Jilin finally made a request, the Dwarf King was naturally willing to repay the favor. Now that they had 13 god-slaying cannons, lending 3 to the humans was nothing. Although the Dwarf King agreed without hesitation and the pros and cons were clear, Staya's thoughts were much more complicated than his. Staya knew what Jilin did before. He wanted to see the Demon King. And before that, Jilin did not agree to the dwarf race lending the god-slaying cannons to the humans. But why? Why did Jilin suddenly change his attitude after meeting the Demon King? What happened? Staya asked. Nothing. The demon god race will attack the Snow Wind Empire in about a month. We'll lend you the god-slaying cannons. So get ready, Jilin said. You have 13 cannons, and you're only lending me 3? You want to take a mile after taking an inch? No, I'm just thinking this is not your style. What style am I? I thought you would ask me for rent, Staya said seriously. Damn it, I was careless. Akira Lin thought to himself. You can forget such a big thing. It means you're very confused now. Staya looked at Jilin and said, and the power of 3 god-slaying cannons is nothing to you. Even if the humans have 3 god-slaying cannons, you won't care. According to your habit, you should say borrow, but not how much, because they're all the same in your heart. But this time, you said a precise number, 3. I thought you wanted to keep the 10 god-slaying cannons. You fought with the Devil King? You think you need 10 god-slaying cannons to defeat him, right? Staya looked at Jilin and spoke faster and faster. The more she spoke, the more certain she became. Jilin blinked. Actually, it was to avoid Staya's gaze. For some reason, Staya's eyes were honest and straightforward. She always looked at people directly. If this kind of gaze was placed on an ordinary person, everyone would think that this person was inexperienced, not scheming, and had never been schemed against by others. But when this gaze landed on Staya's face, it made people feel that she could see through people's hearts. Her eyes were like the bright sunlight, able to illuminate the deepest darkness in other people's hearts, making all evil and conspiracies unable to hide and completely exposed under her gaze. Sometimes, Jilin felt that Staya's eyes were even more powerful than his golden dragon's eyes. His eyes could go up to the sky and down to the underworld, and Staya was 10 times more powerful than him. Actually, Jilin knew that the so-called seeing through people's hearts was just an illusion. It was a sense of inferiority that ordinary people felt when they saw Staya, who was too clean and bright. But Jilin did not know why he would feel this way under Staya's gaze. She was just a human. He did not do anything. All he did was scheme a little fine. Jilin suddenly understood why most of the saints in human history didn't have a good life. They either lived miserably or died heroically. Most of them were like that. It was because they were too tall, too clean, and compared to everyone else in the world. Before you were born, everyone was shamelessly seeking personal gain, fighting for power and profit. They would do anything to get what they wanted. It was so normal that they could even shout slogans like "every man for himself." Then, when you came out, everything changed. What was originally normal suddenly became despicable. What was originally normal suddenly became scum. No one wanted to be scum. So what could they do? It was too difficult to change themselves, but it was easy to kill you. You were the only one who was sober when everyone was drunk, making others look like lunatics. It was easy to get you drunk and drive you away. It was another joyous banquet. In the end, this kind of person was too much of an eyesore. Jilin was silent for a long time without speaking. Staya knew she was right. Was the Demon King really that terrifying? Did Jilin have to rely on the god-killing cannon to compete? I might not lose, but I'm not confident of winning. Staya's expression became complicated. Although Jilin could not see through people's hearts, he knew what she was thinking. So you two are on par. You can say that. You have 10 god-killing cannons. Can you win? It can increase my chances of winning, but not necessarily. What if I don't use these 3 god-killing cannons? It's useless. What if you team up with the third prince? I won't do it. Why? They're very polite to me, so why should I fight with them with my life? The Megalosaurus and the Demon King, even if they're not on the same side, are on the opposite side of humans. Didn't humans say that the enemy of my enemy is my friend? But when the common enemy is gone, who can guarantee that the two sides will not turn against each other? I said I might not lose. Plus, our races are much stronger than humans. Then why were those races suppressed by humans for so many years? Because the dwarf race did not have enough flames and ores. The small volcano in the Snow Wind Empire was not enough to support the needs of the dwarf race. Because the orc race was never truly united. Because the beasts did not have a real beast king. Because the oceanic race was suppressed by the water dragon king's array. Jilin said a lot in a row, like a cannonball. Staya was suddenly stunned. She was silent for a long time. After a long time, Staya sighed as if she was discouraged. She looked at Jilin and said slowly, "So, you've already made preparations for war with the demon god race. You've already made up your mind." Staya instantly understood. Since Jilin had said so much and so quickly, it was obvious that he had already thought about it, and had even thought about it more than once. This time, it was Jilin's turn to be silent. "So, you also want to destroy humans?" Staya said with a trembling voice. Jilin was prepared to fight with the demon god race, but he was unwilling to fight with humans. This meant that he wanted to wait until the demon god race finished fighting with humans before fighting with the demon god race. After fighting with the demon king, Jilin judged that he had a chance to fight with the demon god race. From Jilin's point of view, the humans would definitely lose? Was this killing with a borrowed knife? Then why did he still want to borrow the humans' god-slaying cannon? Did he want to use the humans to test the strength of the demon god race? Don't forget, the people of the Red Dragon religion are all your followers. You can rest assured about this, Jilin said. Thank you for your recommendations, monthly votes, and rewards. Thank you very much. Chapter 386. Staya left. When she left, her back was filled with an inexplicable sense of loneliness. It was like the feeling of being betrayed by friends and family. Jilin shook his head and felt like his brain was damaged. Seeing the loneliness from a simple back was clearly something that only a group of mentally ill humans would do. She seems to have drawn a clear line with us. The Dwarf King seemed to have sensed it too. On this matter, we will part ways in the end, Jilin said. His goal was to rule a world where all races were equal. And Staya hoped that the balance of this world would not be broken. There was no room for compromise. Only two could survive. Then, do we still need to borrow the god-slaying cannons? The Dwarf King asked. He was still reluctant. Yes. Jilin glanced at the Dwarf King. Someone has to test the waters for us first. If the stick is not long enough, how can we test the waters? Huh. The Dwarf King was amused. He felt that Jilin's words were getting more and more interesting. In your opinion, without these 3 god-slaying cannons, the humans can't even test the waters of the Demon God clan? Not necessarily. I have never seen a real human, but the humans will definitely lose. However, it would be best if both sides suffer. The humans will definitely lose because of the Demon King? Yes. Then what will we do when the humans are destroyed? The Demon King is my opponent. You just have to be responsible for the humans. What if you can't defeat the Demon King? The Dwarf King glanced at Jilin and asked carefully. I can at least stall him. The Dwarf King was shocked. Jilin did not deny it. Even Jilin did not want to defeat him. He only wanted to stall him. Gulp. The Dwarf King swallowed his saliva. He really wanted to persuade Jilin. Since he had no confidence in fighting the Demon King, he might as well join forces with the humans first. Even if he defeated the Demon King, what about fighting the humans? The Dwarf King looked like he wanted to say something, but stopped. Jilin certainly understood his concerns. Don't worry. Even if I fail, I have a backup plan. Nothing will go wrong. Then what do we need to do? Now, I need you to make some small toys. The people of the true human race seem to be able to constantly release cold air. The temperature around them is extremely low. If humans fought with them for a long time, they might be frozen stiff and unable to even hold their weapons. Therefore, we need to make a small item that can be worn by people. It can be used to maintain a person's body temperature. The Dwarf King blinked, sweat dripping down his face. At first, Jilin said that it was a small toy, and the Dwarf King didn't care. But the more he listened, the more he felt that something was amiss. The Dwarf King thought to himself, this doesn't seem to be the business scope of the dwarf race. The dwarves could forge swords and cannons. However, the thing Jilin mentioned seemed to be classified as a magical item. Moreover, what Jilin said wasn't new at all. The dwarf race had considered doing this many years ago. In the early years, the dwarf race and the Snow-Wind Empire supported each other and lived together in the snow. How many people froze to death in the Snow-Wind Empire in a year? A product that could withstand low temperatures was naturally in the dwarf race's plan. However, they didn't succeed for many years. Now that Jilin casually said to make a small toy, how could it be said that it was made? The Dwarf King began to think about how to refuse. Don't worry, I will solve the problem of the energy used to withstand low temperatures. Jilin said, the difficulty is not only this. The Dwarf King's expression didn't ease up. Indeed, a small fire energy that can be used for a long time is the biggest difficulty. If we have your help, we are confident that we can make one for you in a short time. However, this is meaningless. Your purpose is to use that thing to arm the entire human race and all the races that belong to the Red Camp. The amount required is unimaginably huge. We can't complete such a huge amount. This is not our field to begin with. Then whose domain should this be? Which? Jilin let out a long sigh of relief. If that was the case, then things were simple. Did you hear that? Styre is gone, come out. Jilin looked at a dark corner and said loudly. The Dwarf King was shocked and followed Jilin's line of sight. He thought to himself that there was someone hiding here and he didn't notice it. He saw a woman in a black robe slowly walking out from the shadows. Even though she was wearing a loose robe, it couldn't hide her graceful curves. It was as if she was a woman who completely blended into the darkness. When she walked out of the darkness, it was as if she was separated from the darkness. Aisha? The Dwarf King didn't dare to recognize her. This woman's temperament was completely different from 2 years ago. She became more profound and unfathomable. When did you come? The Dwarf King asked. I came when I noticed that Jilin woke up. It was just that Styre was here before, so it was inconvenient for me to come out. Aisha said. Why are you in such a hurry? What's the matter? Jilin asked. It's not a big deal. Have you met the Demon King? Aisha asked. Yes. How is it? It's very tricky. Your efforts over the years were not in vain. You really released an incredible guy. What do you need to do to be sure of winning? There are 3 ways. Jilin showed 3 fingers. First, I'll sleep for 5,000 years. When I reach maturity, it'll be easy to take him down. Second, the Dwarf King can modify the Dragon Scale Sword. If it's 50% stronger, it won't be a problem. Don't think about the first way. After you sleep for 5,000 years, when you wake up, only the Demon God Clan will be left in the world. You won't have to fight with him, Aisha said angrily, and then glanced at the Dwarf King. The Dwarf King saw that both Aisha and Jilin were looking at him, and quickly shook his head like a rattle drum. What kind of joke was this? The Dragon Scale Sword almost exhausted all the high-end resources and reserves of the Dwarf Clan. It was the pinnacle work of the Dwarf Clan. Upgrade it? He wanted to, but he didn't have the strength. Aisha saw the Dwarf King's reaction and couldn't help but sigh. What's the third way? The third way is for the Elf Queen to help me with an arrow, Jilin said. Aisha blinked. So you're saying that there's no chance of winning? You can understand it that way, Jilin said. Then, we have to increase our chances of winning, Aisha said. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you'll never be defeated. Jilin used his huge and ferocious dragon face to force a smirk. That's right. So we need humans to test the enemy's strength first. Aisha pondered for a moment. The thing you mentioned, I can help. When the time comes, cold and evil laughter sounded in the depths of the Red Dragon Palace. Jilin and Aisha's laughter rose and fell one after another, but they complemented each other. The Dwarf King shuddered at the thought of this. He looked at the treacherous Jilin, and he could no longer see a trace of his previous majestic and unsophisticated appearance. The current Jilin was actually somewhat similar to Aisha. No, just in terms of temperament, it could be said that they were exactly the same. When he was traveling with Jilin in the wilderness, the Dwarf King was still thinking that Staya and Aisha could influence Jilin at the same time, as if light and darkness were suppressing each other. In the future, who would have a greater influence? Now it seemed that it was indeed easier for light to influence a life than for darkness to infect a life. Chapter 387. Ahem! The Dwarf King coughed hard, interrupting the laughter of Aisha and Jilin. It's easy to say. The witches have also been entrenched in the Snow Wind Empire for many years, but they still haven't been able to make a portable item to dispel the cold. That's because there's no such thing as him. Aisha pointed at Jilin. Yes, the core of this thing is made by me. What you need to do is very simple. Jilin raised his fingertips, and the fire elements in the air began to gather. Slowly, it turned into a red bead, the size of a glass bead that human children play with. The Dwarf King reached out and caught it. He only felt a burst of warmth around his body the moment he touched the red ball. The Dwarf King was shocked. His current position was in the depths of the volcano. To be able to clearly feel the rise in temperature here, one could imagine how amazing the heating effect of the red ball was. Isn't this good? The Dwarf King was dumbfounded. In his view, this thing that Jilin casually made could be used. Wasn't this the effect that the Dwarf King envisioned? If this was enough, wouldn't the dwarf race have nothing to do with it? This thing can indeed achieve the purpose of thermal insulation. Jilin said, but now there's a flaw. What flaw? The Dwarf King looked at it over and over again, but he really couldn't find any flaw. This is just a product formed by the convergence of fire elements. It's very simple for me to make. Jilin said. The Dwarf King's eyebrows kept twitching. He thought that this was the ultimate dream of many creatures. But there's also a problem. Jilin continued. What's the problem? The Dwarf King asked. That is, this thing will get out of my control after leaving a certain distance from me. The world's rules will force the fire elements to disperse. This? What do you mean? On the surface, to put it simply, this thing will explode, and the power is not small. The Dwarf King was shocked. He looked at the red ball in his hand and could no longer feel a trace of warmth. He wanted to throw this thing out, but he didn't dare to move. Jilin said that the power was not small. Then wouldn't it be able to blow him into powder? Don't worry, it's safe now. Jilin used his two huge fingernails to pinch the red bead. So what you and Aisha need to do is to create a device that can stabilize it. The Dwarf King suddenly understood and breathed a sigh of relief. If it was this kind of stabilizer, then the dwarves were very familiar with it. From energy guns to the god-slaying cannons, which one of them did not require stable energy? No problem. The Dwarf King was suddenly full of confidence. But how are we going to give these things to the humans? We just parted ways with the human race. Don't worry about it, Jilin said. Although Staya has a very high status among humans now, she is actually the person who can't represent humans. This was because most humans were not like her, who had perseverance and integrity. They would easily give up their position and bottom line for the sake of benefits. Those are real humans. They won't refuse our gifts, and no one dares to refuse, because that would mean becoming enemies with his own race. The Dwarf King stared blankly at Jilin. After a long while, he sighed. You really have no loopholes now. Jilin was also stunned. It's okay. One day later, Staya returned to the sacred city and summoned all the important people of the Saimai Empire to the palace. The royal palace was bustling with activity, and people were moving about. Everyone was very confused by the Holy Queen's sudden summons. But Staya did not even let them say a word. Staya directly pulled out the holy sword and raised it above her head. She looked at everyone and said, "Everyone, the time has come. The legendary catastrophe is coming. This is the most desperate doomsday in the sacred book of light. Maybe we can't escape the control of fate, but we can only struggle. Do your best. This time, there won't be any survivors. May God bless you. May God love the world." Staya's declaration was short and powerful. There was no foreshadowing. It was very direct and extremely blunt. It was like a hammer that directly smashed people's heads without any warning. People did not suddenly become enlightened, nor did they suddenly become enraged and want to fight to the death. They were completely stunned. This was the reaction of someone who was hit by a hammer. What happened? Why did the Holy Queen suddenly say this? Doomsday? Myth? Battle? Fight with who? Without waiting for too long, the Empire's military department showed everyone the Empire's military plan for the next 3 months. Snow Wind Empire, Tumu City. Most of the people present had never been to the Snow Wind Empire and were not familiar with the Snow Wind Empire. However, they had all heard of the name Tumu City because it was really too special and too famous. The northernmost city of the Snow Wind Empire and also the northernmost city of the human race. Just like the easternmost calm wind pass of the divine dragon empire, it was a world-famous landmark. Tumu City's territory occupied almost 10% of the Snow Wind Empire's territory, but the people there were less than 1,000th of the Snow Wind Empire's population. Because the temperature there was too cold, people were not willing to live there. There were many military camps and countless soldiers there. Everyone's gaze landed on the military officer's face at the same time. So it was like this. That old man was originally in high spirits, but a few days ago, he suddenly became haggard. His eyes were red, and his white hair was falling down at a speed visible to the naked eye. Some of the people who were close to him even asked if there was something wrong with the old man's body. If that was the case, then he should quickly go to the church for treatment. But every time, the old man would wave his hand and say it was not a problem. It was not a problem. Today, everyone finally realized why the old man was like this. It was because he was forced. The Empire wanted to go to the north of the Snow Wind Empire to fight. They needed too many things. Rations, winter clothes, gloves, blankets. The Simi Empire was close to a volcano. When did they think about this? What kind of tent could withstand that kind of wind and snow? Thinking about these problems gave them a headache. No wonder the old man started to lose his hair. Staya did not care about the crowd's noise and their endless doubts. The reason why she spoke so quickly and concisely was because she did not want to listen to their meaningless complaints. It had already happened. Even if you did not want it to happen, it still happened. Even if you cannot accept it, you could only actively solve it. If you hesitated, you would only miss the opportunity. Some people said that as long as you did not treat the problem as a problem, it would not be a problem. But Staya felt that although it made sense, it also depended on what the problem was. The problem of the end of the world was definitely not on this list. But this kind of thing could only be figured out by themselves. If others tried to persuade them, it would only make things worse. Luckily, the people in the palace were all smart people. Even if they could not figure it out now, after a while, they would definitely understand that there was no way out. Staya believed in them. Staya walked up to the rooftop. The afterglow of the setting sun dyed the entire sky and the palace orange. Staya was in the middle of it, and her heart felt warm. It was so beautiful that it was intoxicating. It was hard to describe with words. The world was so beautiful. It should not welcome the end of the world and become cold. Staya looked at the sky in the north and thought silently. Staya turned her head and looked to the west. I will let you do it. The more power you have, the more trouble you will face. The world is not controlled by anyone, and it is also not up to you. Chapter 388. Staya looked at the sunset and made up her mind. Your Majesty. A voice came from behind. Staya didn't need to turn around to know who it was. It was the head guard of the palace. During every meeting, he was always half a step behind Staya to her right. There was only one possibility for him to be here now. The situation downstairs couldn't be controlled anymore. Are they still arguing? Staya said. There's not much time left. This. The guard didn't know what to say. The Holy Queen didn't seem like she should be disturbed. Seems like we should use more force to knock them down. Staya smiled. Is the holy coffin done? The guard's pupils shrank. It's mostly done. But the craftsman said that it'll take another 2 years to finish. Staya's laughter seemed to have some mockery. Pointless effort. Why make that thing so beautiful? The person using it can't even see it. Do they want people to see the coffin after they die? Tell them that it's fine as long as they don't leave. I need to use it now. I'm going to bring it to the Snow Wind Empire. Spread the news. The guard was shocked and said loudly, Your Majesty will shine through the ages and live forever. How can you say something like that? Live forever? Staya suddenly thought of Aisha. Forget it. Who wants to be like her? Go, bring the holy coffin back before it gets dark. I want to see it with my own eyes. The guard was silent for a while and finally bowed. Yes. The next day, the news of the palace guards taking the Holy Queen's order away from the sanctum spread across the entire sacred city. The entire Simai Empire was shocked. The Holy Queen was going to lead a team to the Snow Wind Empire to fight a war. At this time, it was very inappropriate to bring a coffin out, whether it was in reality or from a moral standpoint. The Snow Wind Empire was far away and had a harsh environment. No matter what they wanted to get there, it would take a lot of manpower and resources. As for the holy coffin, it was usually made of pure white marble that was as thick as a palm. Furthermore, it was embedded with gold and precious stones. It was expensive and heavy. It would be troublesome to bring it along when going to war. Furthermore, this item had an extraordinary significance. It was considered an essential prop for the burial of the previous holy maidens of the Church of Light. As long as this thing was not used, it would remain in the sanctum and be baptized by the holy light all day long. Once he took it out, he had to use it. This was a tradition of the Church of Light that had never changed. Why did the Holy Queen take it out at this time? And to bring him to the Snow Wind Empire? Was His Majesty certain that he would die in the Snow Wind Empire? The Emperor's attitude had a huge impact on the country. When the Emperor went into battle with the intention to die, the entire country would become extremely irritable. There was a saying in the Middle Empire. Although it was a bit exaggerated, it wasn't wrong. If the monarch was humiliated, his subjects would die. But they didn't say what would happen if June died. What about the officials? Die a few more times? That was impossible. At that time, everyone from the Simai Empire who went to war would be ashamed. The ministers realized the seriousness of the matter and began to prepare for war. Countless caravans carrying supplies headed towards the Snow Wind Empire like a long dragon. One of the caravans was covered with a large white cloth. Under the white cloth was a white sarcophagus. Middle Empire. The Golden King wore a yellow robe and sat on the golden throne. He lowered his head and looked at the memorial in his hand. After a while, the third prince raised his head and rubbed his forehead. He looked at Bane and said, The Holy Queen brought the sarcophagus to battle. Is it to stimulate the battle intent, or is she really prepared to die? Staya brought the sarcophagus out. Bane opened his eyes wide and instantly stood up. He didn't even notice that the tea beside him had been spilled. The third prince was stunned. He thought to himself, Is it necessary? In the Middle Empire, the generals often carried the sarcophagus to battle to show that they would fight to the death. If they won, the sarcophagus would be given to the general. If they lost, they would use it themselves. To the third prince, this was a common thing. Although no emperor had done this before, the third prince wasn't sure, but Bane was from the Simai Empire. The story of a sarcophagus was very familiar to everyone in the Simai Empire. This thing, you can take it out as you wish, but if you want to put it back. Sorry, the Simai Empire didn't have this precedent. Staya was really prepared to die. No matter if she won or not, she didn't plan to come back alive. I have to go. Bane came back to his senses and looked at the third prince. I've said what I should say to you. You can do as you see fit. The third prince looked at Bane's anxious expression and couldn't help but become serious. Brother Long really didn't die? You think Staya can kill him? Or, even if Staya could kill him, would she do it? Brother Long, What was he trying to do? The third prince muttered to himself. Bane had already left. Your Majesty, the golden airship fleet is ready. Zhao Qi suddenly appeared in front of the third prince and bowed. Oh, the third prince paused. Then let's go immediately. Yes. Wait. Yes. Bane shouldn't be too far away. Give him a golden airship. He can go anywhere he wants. Yes. One more thing. Your Majesty, please tell me. For this war, should I bring a sarcophagus? No need. Zhao Qi was shocked and said hurriedly. If you don't bring one, I feel like I'll lose. Your Majesty, if you insist, a lot of people will jump into the river. There's no river around the capital. 5 days later, Bane stood on the bow of the golden airship and looked to the west. With that kind of gaze, it seemed like he could see through all the limpid autumn waters. Even though the strong wind made his tears flow and his hair stand on end, Bane still prayed in his mind. Faster, faster. He had a rough idea of what Staya was thinking. Although it was simple and crude, it was very feasible. It was open and honest, very much like Staya's style. But the price was too high. Bane suddenly felt like Staya was the stupidest person in the world. Once she set her sights on a target, she would move forward bravely. She wouldn't turn or choose a path. She would just keep moving forward with her head down. Not only could he not pull her back, he couldn't make her bend even a little bit on this straight path. Persistence and stubbornness were only one word apart. But was it really worth it? Even if the world was ending, it wouldn't be her turn to die. It was so hard to live as a human. Don't always think of dying so easily. Bane looked to the north and seemed to be able to see the long line of people trudging through the ice and snow. There was only one sentence in his mind. Don't die, Staya. Chapter 389. 7 days later, Staya led the vanguard and finally passed through the snow with the help of the Snow Wind Empire's people and arrived at the Demon City. However, even if the humans' magic and technology had improved significantly, the distance between the two empires was still too long for the humans. The main force would probably need half a month to arrive. Jilin's news was that the Demon God clan would attack the humans in a month, and with the preparations before the battle, they could only barely make it in time. Your Majesty, Saint Queen, we're here. The voice of the guide came from the front. Staya raised her head and was suddenly stunned. The huge shadow of the city covered Staya's vision, as if even the sky above her was covered. However, she was clearly still very far away from the city. This meant that the city was taller than Staya's imagination. A huge towering city appeared in the extreme north of the vast ice plains, like a monster that could swallow the heavens and devour the earth. And this place was supposed to be sparsely populated. Where is this? Staya was a bit confused. Your Majesty, the Holy Queen, this is the border of the Demon City. The guide replied respectfully. Staya blinked and pointed at the gate of the towering city. I can still read. In the direction that Staya was pointing at, there were two huge words carved on the gate, Wind and Moon, which could be seen clearly from far away. Wind and Moon City, the capital of the Snow Wind Empire. Even though the Snow Wind Empire had vast ice plains and it was easy to get lost, Staya thought that her sense of direction was pretty good. She could tell that this was the north of the Snow Wind Empire. But even so, why was the Wind and Moon City here? Shouldn't it be in the center of the Snow Wind Empire? Saint, Queen, welcome, a familiar sentence. Staya was shocked. She raised her head and saw that the Iron Blood King had appeared in front of her car. Staya quickly jumped down from the car and nodded slightly to greet the Iron Blood King. The Iron Blood King also nodded back. Sorry, I'm too shocked. Why is the Wind and Moon City here? After a simple greeting, Staya immediately asked. The Iron Blood King looked troubled. This question was a little too long to explain, and it was a little inconvenient for him. Replying to Your Majesty, the Holy Queen, the Wind Moon City is the Snow Wind Empire's first mobile city. Lawrence was still wearing his big red cloak, and he thought that he was very perceptive. I knew about this a long time ago. Staya had a helpless look on her face. She wondered why this person was still so out of line. I'm not asking how it came here. I'm asking why you brought it here. Isn't this the capital of the Snow Wind Empire? How could they be placed at the front line? What about the people in the capital? The Iron Blood King was silent for a moment. If not, it would be difficult for the Empire to exert its full power. Isn't this putting the people in danger? Staya frowned. She was already a little angry. In her opinion, as the Emperor of the Empire, protecting the people should be the primary responsibility. How could he let the people of the Empire take risks? That was the responsibility of soldiers, kings, and nobles. Does the Holy Queen think that the people in the city don't know about the movement of the Wind Moon City? Duke Lawrence said, long before we left, our emperor had already announced the war. Those who are willing to leave have already left. Those who are left are those who are willing to share the joys and sorrows of the empire. Furthermore, His Majesty also said that if the war is not going well, Wind Moon City will be sent away first. We will stay behind and fight to the death. Staya looked at Duke Lawrence and remained silent. She knew that things were not as good as he said. Staya knew that the Wind Moon City was a capital. The original intention of transforming it into a mobile city was definitely not for the sake of going to the battlefield or transporting resources and soldiers. Staya dared to guarantee that this was a backup plan to make it easier to run away in case of an emergency. Furthermore, he said that those who were willing to leave had already left. This was even more nonsense. If they had no other choice, who would be willing to leave their home? The Wind Moon City had houses that they had lived in for many years, and they had accumulated a lifetime of wealth. Who would be willing to leave? Furthermore, there were those who had nowhere else to go other than the Wind Moon City. They had no way to leave and could only follow the city here. However, Staya also knew that this was already the decision after weighing the pros and cons. The Iron Blood King had no other choice. Have we really been forced to this point? Staya looked at the Iron Blood King and said in a deep voice, "Hugh." The Iron Blood King looked up and sighed. After the Red Disaster, the war, our empire has yet to recover. Staya was silent. That's right, when they were fighting against Jilin, the Snow Wind Empire had indeed paid the most. The mobile city, the bright snow divine weapon, these were not obtained for free. They required a huge amount of resources. In comparison, the Saimai Empire had it much easier. The Snow Wind Empire's vitality had been greatly damaged. They had no choice but to use the capital. Forget it. As long as we can win this war, everything will be fine. If we don't win, even though the world is big, it will be hard to escape misfortune. Indeed, if the opponent is a human, I wouldn't have to do this. That's right, the Demon God Clan doesn't have any consciousness of not harming civilians. Those who are not of our clan will definitely have different intentions. Staya didn't want to continue this conversation. From her point of view, if it wasn't for this sentence, the war between humans and Jilin would not have happened. Who else has arrived besides me? The Golden King has arrived. Staya wasn't surprised at all. After all, he flew here. Also, Flay has arrived. Staya's eyes flashed. I'll have to trouble the Iron Blood King to bring me to see this legend. It's my pleasure, the Iron Blood King said as he waved his hand behind him. Duke Lawrence immediately handed over a talisman-like item. No, it looked like a talisman. It was a white cloth bag 2 inches long and 2 inches wide. It looked very exquisite. On the front was written bright, and on the back was victory. This is? Staya was startled. Is it for a good thing? When did the Snow Wind Empire do this? The Iron Blood King also looked at Staya with a strange expression. This you don't know? Staya was even more confused. She looked at it twice and confirmed that she had never seen it before. Should I know? This is something from a Church of Light. Duke Lawrence exclaimed. Staya was startled. She reached out and took it. She felt a warm current flowing through her body. All the coldness disappeared like snow melting away. How many of these are there? Staya immediately realized the significance of this item and quickly asked. The Iron Blood King and Duke Lawrence looked at each other. They were both confused. The Saintess didn't know about this item from the Church of Light. Was this appropriate? Or the Pope and the Saintess didn't get along? In the depths of Mount Gerda, above the red ground, a golden spaceship was heading straight towards the west. Bane looked towards the west and held the helm tightly. He was the only one left on the spaceship. The original soldiers on the spaceship couldn't enter the range of the volcano, so they got off the spaceship at the edge of the volcano. Bane was a bit flustered. His situation wasn't good. Without Jilin's protection, even the spaceship couldn't withstand the high temperature in the depths of the volcano. The parts of the spaceship creaked from time to time. It was on the verge of collapsing. Fortunately, Bane could already see the outline of Red Dragon City. Chapter 390. Ha ha. The sound of parts colliding rang in Bane's ears. Cold sweat broke out on Bane's forehead. He didn't know the reason, but it might be a part that was loose. This was obviously a big problem for the spaceship. It was even more of a bolt out of the blue for the people on the spaceship. Bane looked at the huge silhouette of Red Dragon City in front of him and prayed that this golden spaceship would hold on before he landed. However, there was a good saying, everything was relative. Humans also had another saying. If you fought with an evil dragon for a long time, you would also become an evil dragon. If you stared into the abyss for a long time, the abyss would stare back. Bane looked at Red Dragon City from the cabin of the golden spaceship. Naturally, the dwarves controlling the energy cannons on Red Dragon City could also see the golden spaceship. Apart from Jilin and the flying dragons that originally belonged to the Divine Dragon Empire, there were no other flying objects above the volcano. It was very quiet. Now, there was a spaceship flying in the sky with 2 trails of green smoke behind it. It was very conspicuous. Hey, look, on the city wall, a young dwarf pointed at the spaceship. On the operating seat of the city defense cannon, a dwarf moved his eyes away from the sight and glanced at the dwarves below. He thought to himself, do I need you to tell me that? A human creation. The young dwarf looked at the golden spaceship and was very angry for some reason. Shoot it down. Let's not, shall we? The dwarf on the control seat was a little hesitant. Only one ship came. It's definitely not here to fight. There should be something going on, right? Besides, I don't think I need to shoot it. It's about to fall. Are you sure? The young dwarf winked. That ship passed through our defense area. It's fine if it collides with the dwarf king, but if it startles that person, the dwarf on the control seat shuddered violently. Seeing that there seemed to be hope, the young dwarf continued to add fuel to the fire. Besides, think about it. We've been guarding here all day for 2 years. Not even a bird has flown in the sky. Aren't you bored? The dwarf on the control seat thought for less than 2 seconds. He gritted his teeth, stomped his feet, and waved his fist fiercely. He said fiercely, damn it, kill it. Bang, bang, bang. Countless energy cannonballs began to explode around the golden spaceship, creating brilliant red fireworks around the spaceship. However, this was not a simple firework after all. Following the explosion of the artillery shell, a strong shockwave was produced. The golden spaceship was swaying left and right, like a broken wooden boat that was sailing in the middle of a stormy sea. They could be destroyed at any time. Damn it, I'm already in this state, and you still want to bombard me. Don't these dwarves have any sympathy at all? Can't they use their brains to think? What kind of person could fly over from this part of the sky with such fanfare? If he's not one of us, why would he fly over here to be a live target? For a moment, Bane was swayed from side to side. He could only hold onto the tiller tightly to stabilize himself. There was nothing else he could do. This golden flying ship was not something that could be piloted by a single person. Being able to head in the right direction was already his limit. Bang, bang, bang. In the blink of an eye, the dwarven archers had fired more than 50 shots at the golden spaceship. Every shot could blow the golden spaceship to pieces, but it was not damaged at all. It's about time, the young dwarf said. Let's shoot a little more. The dwarf shooting the cannons was obviously getting carried away. This thing doesn't even use artillery shells. The young dwarf was somewhat helpless, but he could understand. An old cat that had been bored for 2 years finally met a mouse. Wouldn't that be playing you to death? Forget it, the young dwarf kept saying. TSK. The dwarf clicked his tongue and finally took aim at the golden spaceship seriously. Bang! The spaceship tilted and fell with a sound. Bane's face was pale. The spaceship lost its balance, and a huge sense of weightlessness hit him. Bane held his breath. He was very familiar with the feeling of weightlessness. Every time Jilin took him to take off and land, he would experience it fiercely, and it was much more intense than this. However, this time, no one could guarantee that he would land safely. The golden spaceship of the Middle Empire. It was said that if one fell while sitting on this thing, the chances of survival would be very slim. Of course, no matter what method humans used to rush into the sky, they would have to bear a huge risk. Once an accident happened, the chances of survival would be very slim. This risk was the price that humans had to pay for forcefully breaking into the forbidden area. God didn't give you wings, but you insisted on flying. God didn't let you eat apples, but you insisted on eating them. This was the original sin of humans. When faced with a crisis, Bane liked to think about nonsense. It was as if he wanted to seize the time to think about the life that he rarely had time to think about. However, Bane gritted his teeth and forced himself to focus. He couldn't die now, he couldn't. However, it was a pity that sometimes this world was still reasonable, and this reason was so cold and hard that it was hard to accept. No matter how strong Bane's will was, he couldn't stop the spaceship from landing. Boom! The spaceship finally collided with the hard volcanic ground, and it turned into fragments amidst the resplendent fireworks. Wind Moon City. No, it should be the Wind Moon City within the Demon City. Staya glared at Flay, and the veins on her forehead popped out. Why did the Red Dragon Empire send only you? It's all because of the Red Dragon God's Oracle. Flay clasped her hands together, lowered her head, and said sincerely. At this moment, she looked more like a model believer than Staya, who was glaring at her. No, she was a devout believer, but the God she believed in wasn't a good one. A person like her was just an evil person in the eyes of the Church of Light. Jilin, what did he say to you? Those who aren't part of the Red Dragon religion can't listen to the Red Dragon God's Oracle. Flay seemed very proud. If you say that, then the Red Dragon religion won't be able to recruit believers. Staya suddenly became even more proud. Flay was stunned, and she felt that Staya's words made sense. Of course, Staya's words made sense. The Church of Light was definitely the senior when it came to the development of the religion. The Red Dragon religion could only learn from them. Tell me, what did Jilin say? He told you to come alone? No, the Red Dragon God even gave us 15 flying dragons. A hint of surprise flashed across Staya's eyes. 15 flying dragons. That was almost half of the Divine Dragon Empire's strength. Moreover, Staya knew that these flying dragons had stayed by Jilin's side before. After being soaked in Jilin's draconic aura, they were no longer the same as before. A flying dragon now was probably stronger than a dragon knight formed by a human and a dragon. Since Flay had brought 15 wyverns with her, Staya had nothing to say. Staya nodded at the third prince and the Iron Blood King. Cough, cough. The third prince coughed twice. He was about to take charge of the situation. Originally, this job should be given to the host, the Iron Blood King. However, this person was really not suitable, so he could only let the third prince do it for him. After all, other than having the title of the Golden King, he was also the human emperor, the demon god race. The Church of Light knows the most about them. Why don't we hear what the Holy Queen thinks first? The third prince looked at Staya. Staya stood up and nodded slightly at the other three. This is my plan. The demon god race will naturally produce a demon king. This demon king will gather most of the demon god race's strength. As long as we defeat this demon king, we will definitely win this battle. As Staya spoke, she slammed her hand on the table fiercely, as if she had slapped the demon king to death. She raised her head and looked at the third prince, who was sitting in front of her. Her eyes were sparkling. The third prince was enveloped by Staya's infectious gaze. He could not help but straighten his back and sit up straight. A sense of responsibility and mission arose spontaneously, as if the heavens had bestowed upon him a great responsibility. All right, let me defeat the Demon King. The third prince clenched his fists and said in a deep voice. He was full of fighting spirit. No, I will do it, Staya said. The third prince was stunned. Chapter 391. With Staya's words, the entire room was silent. The other three looked at each other and didn't know what to do. Shouldn't the strongest person here be the third prince? Shouldn't things like defeating the king of demons be left to the emperor of human race? You'll do it? The third prince looked at Staya and asked. He didn't understand what Staya meant. Or rather, he understood, but didn't dare to believe it. What? You think I can't beat the demon king? Staya looked at the third prince with a smile. She seemed to be full of confidence and looked down on everyone. It was as if she didn't care about the demon king at all. Staya's attitude made the third prince and the others confused. Although they were about to fight, the third prince wasn't familiar with the demon god clan or the demon king. None of the humans had seen the demon god clan before, so he didn't know how strong the demon king was. But according to the Church of Light's description, the appearance of the demon god clan should be a crisis that could wipe out the entire human race. Even the red disaster paled in comparison to it. With such a calamity, wouldn't the demon king be stronger than the red calamity? But seeing Staya's current performance, the third prince suddenly felt that the demon king wasn't that big of a deal. Wasn't he making a big fuss by bringing the army of the Middle Empire? Was the Snow Wind Empire and Staya enough to deal with the demon god clan? Of course, there was an unlikely possibility. That was that Staya was stronger than him. Did she really kill Brother Long? Oh no. Flay already said before that she came here because of the Red Dragon Oracle. Brother Long didn't die, but he couldn't tell that Staya was that strong. Did she become so strong that he couldn't see through her after she went to Elf Island? The third prince bit his lips and looked at Staya as he pondered. Since the Holy Queen is so confident, why not give it a try? Fry propped her elbows on the table and lazily propped up her head. She smiled mysteriously. No matter what, he's still a hero of the human race. I believe that a small demon king is no different from a lamb under the Holy Queen's sword. The third prince narrowed his eyes and suddenly felt a little irritated. He felt as if everyone else knew something, but he was the only one who was clueless. Agreed. The Iron Blood King's words were as concise as ever. Everyone had only heard of the Demon King, but no one had ever seen one. He didn't even know what they looked like. Of course, they needed someone with sufficient strength to test the waters before the real battle. Now that Staya had taken the initiative to do this, the Iron Blood King was happy to go with the flow. The third prince gritted his teeth. He suddenly felt that it was a good thing that this meeting did not adopt a democratic system where the minority obeys the majority. Otherwise, he wouldn't even have the chance to speak now. The third prince leaned forward slightly. He wanted to stand up. He disagreed with this. Even if they all agreed, even if Staya herself agreed, he wouldn't agree. He wasn't dead yet. How could he let Staya challenge an enemy as strong as Jilin? This was not in line with the attitude and noble upbringing that the third prince had formed after hanging out in Spring Breeze Restaurant all year round. Ever since the third prince stayed in Spring Breeze Restaurant, was there anyone else who humiliated prostitutes in the red light district? Who dared to drink with prostitutes and not pay? Oh, Ouyang Ju, that old bastard, didn't count. He was already too old. He couldn't really drink with prostitutes anymore. If he didn't pay, then so be it. Anyway, the sisters didn't suffer any losses. It was only half a jar of liquor. It was nothing. When the third prince was in the red light district, he was powerless and could still protect the pitiful girls on the street. Now, he was the emperor of the Middle Empire and was the emperor of a human race. The third prince believed that even if he couldn't protect all the girls in the country, he wouldn't watch the girl in front of him suffer. Otherwise, wouldn't she be able to go back alive? The third prince was full of anger. When he was about to stand up, he suddenly looked up and saw Staya's infectious gaze. The third prince was stunned. He suddenly understood. It turned out that Staya didn't look at him to encourage him to be the first in the world and challenge the Demon King. She simply wanted to tell him, "Don't stop me." The third prince suddenly froze. How about I go first? The third prince said, "I'm much stronger than I was 2 years ago." The third prince really wanted to persuade Staya. "No need. You're the emperor. If you lose, won't the human race suffer a great loss?" Staya smiled. Although her smile was bright, her gaze was kind, and her voice was gentle, the third prince felt that there was no room for doubt and no room for negotiation. She was determined. The third prince sighed in his heart. He thought that she was the perfect example of someone who was soft on the outside but strong on the inside. If that's the case, then I'll go with the Holy Queen's wishes. The third prince stood up and bowed to Staya. At the highest point of the Wind Moon City was a tall square stone tower. It was said that when the Wind Moon City was at the center of the Snow Wind Empire, the Iron Blood King could stand in this stone tower and look at the border of the Middle Empire. This was a legend in the Middle Empire. However, every Golden King sneered at this and told it to their descendants as a joke. Therefore, this legend was passed down from generation to generation in the Middle Empire. The third prince also heard this legend when he was young. At that time, Li Zheng didn't believe it, and he didn't believe it either. But now, the third prince was lucky enough to be the first Golden King to climb this stone tower. The moment he walked into the room at the highest point, he believed it. The entire stone tower only had this room at the highest point. Below, it was a spiral staircase. And in this room, there was a huge telescope. This telescope took up almost half of the room. This thing was obviously made by the dwarves. To be able to see half of the empire. This was the magical weapon that every emperor dreamed of. The third prince looked at the telescope a few times and didn't have the mood to look at it anymore, even though the scenery in the mirror was fascinating, because he was very worried about Staya's condition. Staya was too decisive. Her decisiveness was very abnormal. What was with the look in her eyes that looked like she had seen her own end and accepted it calmly? This kind of character, who couldn't be pulled back once she set her sights on a target, was really a headache. Just like the saying, even if there are millions of people, I will still go forward. Although these words sounded heroic to the extreme, they were also extremely chic and unrestrained. But in reality, it wasn't like that at all. A person who really said, even if there are millions of people, I will still go forward, wouldn't end up breaking through the enemy's formation. Instead, he would only be crushed by the millions of people and never be able to recover. And Staya seemed to have prepared for this. You are here. A voice sounded. The third prince turned around and looked. Staya was slowly walking up. Why are you here? The third prince calmed down and said, I heard that the stone tower in the Wind Moon City is very famous. My father often talks about it. Now that I have the opportunity to come here, of course, I have to come and take a look, Staya said. So this thing is also famous in the Simai Empire. The third prince didn't know what to say and could only awkwardly change the topic. Staya suddenly smiled and looked at the third prince. How is the Golden King? Did he choose any new concubines in the past 2 years? How many concubines does the Golden King have in the Middle Empire's 3 palaces and 6 halls? Oh, Miss Chun is making fun of me. I wouldn't dare. The third prince exaggeratedly bowed with his hands in front to show that he was begging for forgiveness. I only have Xueqing. This life is enough. How could I have any other thoughts? Staya chuckled. She didn't believe a single word of the third prince's words. Chapter 392. If you say that, then I'll take it seriously. Staya looked at the third prince and smiled. Every word I say comes from the bottom of my heart. Everything I say is true. Heaven and earth can be my witness. Why doesn't the Saint of the Light believe me? The third prince yelled exaggeratedly, as if he was wronged. Staya glanced at him. If you say that, then I'll take it seriously. Of course. The third prince swore. Okay, if you bully Xueqing in the future, I won't let you go. Of course. But speaking of which, Saint, you're really responsible as a matchmaker. Usually matchmakers don't care about the bride after she marries into the family. But you're good. Every time we meet, you scare me. Not happy. I wouldn't dare. The third prince suddenly sighed. Now, you have the Church of Light in one hand and the Simai Empire in the other. In terms of power, I'm afraid that no one in the world can compare to you. In addition, you're so concerned about Xueqing's matter. Looks like as long as you're alive, I'll have no chance of taking in concubines. Staya paused. She looked at the third prince and said seriously, Don't forget that I'm not the only matchmaker between you and Xueqing. Jilin and Aisha also gave ideas. The third prince froze. He felt a chill run down his spine. Is this necessary? The third prince scratched his head and said in a low voice. With Staia's words, the third prince would have to think twice if he wanted to get rid of an empress in the future. This could easily lead to the downfall of the country. Must it be like this? Third young master suddenly asked. Even the matter of watching me treat Xueqing well can only be left to Brother Long? Let's not do that. Brother Long is unreasonable. Staia nodded. That's the only way. Do the humans really not have the power to fight back? Staia shook her head. That's the natural enemy of humans. They are born to suppress humans, just like the flying dragon to the Sea Clan. Back then, the Divine Dragon Empire's 20 flying dragons were enough to prevent the endless ocean's sea race from taking a single step past Calmwind Pass. Although the human race would not be suppressed to such an extent by the demon god race, it was still not optimistic. Moreover, the human race had suffered great losses in the battle with Jilin and had yet to recover. How can we not prepare for the worst under such circumstances? The world might not necessarily thank you. They might even think that you deceived them and that you are a despicable person who gained fame by deceiving the world. That's the truth. The Holy Maiden's illustrious name has never been tainted by a speck of dust. If that's the case, wouldn't it be a pity? If you don't even want your life, what's your reputation? Staia said disdainfully. The third prince blinked, unable to say anything. To someone from the Middle Empire who used their lives to live for their reputation, reputation was more important than their lives. The culture of the Middle Empire had a whole system of huge theories to support this point of view. If they started a discussion on this topic, even with Staia's eloquence, the third prince was confident that he could debate with her for 3 days and 3 nights without being at a disadvantage. However, he clearly did not have the time for that now. Therefore, even though the third prince had a lot of things to say, he could not say a single word. Red Dragon Palace. Bane was lying in the deepest part of the Red Dragon Palace. His eyes were tightly shut, and he was bleeding from many places and had many fractures. His arms and legs, as well as some joints on his body, were all bent at a strange angle. He looked like a broken doll that had been ravaged by a cruel child. He was already breathing in less, then he was breathing out more than he was breathing out. What happened to him? Jilin glanced at him and asked. He came on the battleship of the Middle Empire and was shot down by the dwarves, Aisha said. Jilin nodded and expressed his satisfaction with the dwarves' behavior. He never liked those things that had no wings but still shamelessly flew in the sky. As for Bane, wasn't he still breathing? As long as he was still breathing, it was not a big deal in Jilin's eyes. Why isn't he dead? Jilin asked. I say a rank 6 human is also very strong, Aisha said. Besides, if he wanted to die with this injury, he would have died long ago. He's just holding on. Huh, he can still hold on with this kind of injury. He must be very stubborn. Although Aisha's words did not make sense, Jilin was already used to it and could even continue to talk. Don't you want to know why he came? Aisha asked. I can probably guess, Jilin said. Aren't you the same? But there are some things that need to be said in person. Aisha's words were full of meaning. By the way, why are you so concerned about this matter? Jilin looked at Aisha. Even if the demon gods destroy the world, they can't kill you, right? After all, you're a great contributor to the god of darkness. But I'm also human. I can't just watch as I'm the only human left in the world. You're also human? Jilin sneered. At least it seems that way. Or was, Aisha said seriously. No. Jilin shook his head. You're just afraid of the loneliness of not having your own kind in the world. Aisha was silent for a moment, then said slowly, That's true, but I don't think there's anything wrong with this, Jilin said. Perhaps this way, you'll feel an unprecedented sense of freedom. As for the so-called loneliness, it's just a small price to pay for freedom, not worth mentioning. At that time, you'll break free from all the shackles that humans have imagined for themselves. Countries, religions, money, feelings, you'll have complete freedom. Aren't you moved? Jilin's eyes shone with an inexplicable light. It seemed like he was quite moved by that complete freedom. But Aisha wasn't him, so Aisha shook her head. The so-called shackles that humans have imagined, that Jilin spoke of were exactly what humans relied on for survival. What a pity, Jilin said. According to my observations, I've discovered that humans' joy and sorrow mostly come from other humans. So I occasionally think that if there's only one human left in the world, he'll definitely live like a god, without joy or sorrow, and incomparably free. Unfortunately, you've lost the chance to experience becoming a god. No joy or sorrow. Aisha said, "It seems like you still don't understand humans well enough. When there's only one human left in the world, he won't live so freely. He'll commit suicide. No joy or sorrow. For humans, it's no different from death." Jilin flapped his wings, no longer discussing this with Aisha. "Since this is your choice, I won't say anything more. Wake him up. Healing is something that the Church of Light does." "I won't do it, you do it." Jilin glared at Aisha, feeling helpless. But fortunately, he had seen the Holy Book of Light. Other than a big move like the God of Light's mercy, he could also casually cast a small healing spell. A little white light lit up on Jilin's fingertips, enveloping Bane's whole body. Bane's wounds began to heal, and his bones and joints began to reset. After a while, Bane slowly woke up. The first person that Bane saw was Aisha. He was delighted, thinking that Aisha had saved him. When he looked up and saw Jilin's huge body, he was even more excited. He wanted to tell Jilin that Staya was carrying the coffin to fight the Demon King. No, she was going to die. He wanted Jilin to quickly save her and kill the Demon King, so that the world would be at peace. But Bane turned his eyes and suddenly saw a huge green rock that was as tall as Jilin. This huge rock looked smooth and heavy, extremely flat, with edges and corners, and was square. It was a standard cuboid as tall as Jilin and as thick as 2 houses. The color was clear, and there was a faint flowing light. At first glance, it was not an ordinary object. "What is this?" Bane was too curious and blurted out. Jilin was also stunned. He did not expect this to be the first thing that this person said after escaping death. Jilin touched the huge rock and even pointed at it with his fingertips. "This is Staya's tombstone." Chapter 393. "What did you say?" Bane's eyes widened as he questioned Jilin. His face was full of disbelief. Such a square green stone was Staya's tombstone. Bane froze for a full 5 seconds before he finally jumped up and yelled at Jilin, "What are you doing?" He felt like he came for nothing. Jilin already knew that Staya was going to die and that she carried the coffin to war. But he didn't care. Thinking about it carefully, the Jilin now was no longer the same as before. He was no longer the megalosaurus that knew nothing about the world and humans. He was now the leader of a large force that could compete with humans and even had the upper hand. He was the ruler of the Red Camp. There was no news that humans could hide from Jilin now. Not to mention anything else, just the dwarves were inextricably linked to humans. Otherwise, where did the wheat seeds planted on the 7th level come from? Jilin should have known the news about Staya carrying the coffin to war earlier than him. It was ridiculous that he was like an idiot that flew over to tell him. Who would have thought that he already knew and even picked such a large tombstone for Staya? Are you planning to watch Staya die? Or do you know what kind of enemy Staya is going to face? Jilin paused for a moment before he finally turned around to look at Bane. "I know. I fought with him before." "You fought with the Demon King." Bane's eyes widened. "You didn't kill him?" Ugh. Even Jilin had a hard time answering Bane's question. What was with this unreasonable trust? "Well, the Demon King is not weaker than me." Bane paused for a moment. As far as he knew, the last creature that could make Jilin say this was the Elf Queen. "You want Staya to fight an enemy that even you can't beat?" Bane narrowed his eyes and said word by word, "Are you scared?" Aisha couldn't help but facepalm. The idea was good, but it was too straightforward. Such an obvious provocation might have been effective on the Jilin of 5 years ago, but now, "Young man, you seem to be looking down on dragons a little." Obviously, Jilin thought so too. He didn't even care about Bane. "Are you really going to watch Staya die without doing anything? Maybe you will regret it," Bane said again. Aisha nodded slightly. Since the provocation didn't work, she changed to emotional. This was more reliable than the previous one. "This is Staya's choice," Jilin said. She has already accepted death, and a worthy death is the best ending for humans. Her choice? What did she say? Bane asked. She asked me to find a tombstone that is big enough for her. Bane suddenly gasped. For the first time, he had the thought of Staya is an idiot. Staya's method was simple and easy to understand. It was even more straightforward and brutal than his provocation. But she was more decisive than him. She didn't leave any room for negotiation. Jilin was forced into a corner, but he didn't realize it. Staya's move was unavoidable. But she didn't have to leave any room for negotiation. There were hundreds of better ways. Why didn't she use those methods? Do I have to sacrifice my blood for the Emperor? Otherwise, it wouldn't be satisfying enough, right? Bane knew from the beginning that Staya was the human that Jilin really valued. Jilin didn't know how it felt to lose someone you cherished. But Bane knew that he had no parents since he was young. Everyone in the neighborhood was his family. He knew this feeling too well. It was heart-wrenching. Now that Staya wasn't dead, Jilin hadn't experienced this feeling before. That was why he could play with the stone with a heavy heart. He even wanted to carve a flower on the stone. But Bane knew that once Staya died, he wouldn't have the mood anymore. Staya probably thought the same. That was why she came up with this evil plan. Staya's death would become a thorn in Jilin's heart. It would hurt occasionally and never be removed. Luckily, Bane saw through this evil plan. Everything could be salvaged. Red Dragon God. Bad news. Bane was startled by the sudden appearance of a figure. He looked carefully. It was Flay. Bane finally understood that Jilin was so well-informed. It wasn't because of the Red Faction's outstanding intelligence system. It was because Jilin had planted people in the core circle of the humans. And he had planted them so openly. What's the matter? Jilin asked. The Demon King has appeared. Flay's voice was urgent. She looked anxious. Jilin was stunned. He counted with his fingers. It seemed that it was half a month too early. Wasn't it supposed to be a month later? How can that be? Jilin asked. But it's only the Demon King. Flay said. Jilin was stunned again. Such a low profile and weak appearance didn't match that idiot's temperament. Oh, right. Jilin understood. The war between the humans and the humans couldn't be called a battle in the Demon King's eyes. It was a trial, a suppression, a big show. However, Jilin was the only spectator. Now that the show was about to start, the main character came out to remind the actors to be prepared. It was natural for the main character to make the show more interesting. If that was the case, then the Demon King was only here to greet them. Since it's only one person, what's there to be nervous about? Jilin was no longer anxious. Because Staya rushed out. Flay suddenly stuttered. She was very careful. Jilin froze. He suddenly turned around. The golden light in his eyes shone brightly. Didn't I ask you to look after her? Your subordinate is incompetent. Even though there was a huge distance between them, Flay still knelt down on one knee. Your subordinate didn't expect Staya to rush out. Aisha looked at Flay's expression and couldn't help but criticize. This new religion was really bad. What was the meaning of subordinate? It wasn't suitable for a religion, right? When the people of the Church of Light prayed to the God of Light, they wouldn't call themselves subordinates. Wouldn't a subordinate of a god still be a god? Why did she rush out? Jilin was really anxious. If Staya only rushed out and habitually tried to reason with the enemy's leader, then it would be fine. But if she directly attacked, the Holy Queen said that the Demon King showed up here alone. Isn't he looking down on humans too much? She wants to use this opportunity to kill the Demon King with her sword and get rid of this great threat. What? Jilin was shocked. What about the third prince? Was he with Staya? No. Why? The Holy Queen said, she is a dragon slayer hero. She is invincible unto the heavens. Killing a small demon king is nothing difficult for her. She doesn't need the human emperor's help. This is to prevent future generations from saying that humans have an unfair advantage. How long has it been since she rushed out? Just now. Idiot. Jilin cursed loudly. It was unknown who he was cursing at. He angrily flapped his wings, as if he was about to soar into the sky. But Jilin suddenly froze. He suddenly remembered that to fly from here to the north of the Snow Wind Empire Even he would need at least half a day's time. Staya definitely wouldn't be able to last half a day. Aisha! Jilin lowered his head and shouted. Aya, you finally remembered. Aisha smiled. There was a magic array that was just constructed beside her. If you really flew out in a hurry, then I would have a headache. Jilin ignored Aisha. He directly turned into his human form and rushed into the magic array. Aisha also followed. Bane was the only one left. He stepped into the magic array. He first looked at the green boulder, then looked at Jilin. He thought to himself that this was really something. Jilin always said that humans were fickle, so the dragon race wasn't any better. The purple light shone brightly. The magic array was activated. Chapter 394. In the depths of the Wind Moon City. In a little-known room, a man covered in a white robe was kneeling in front of a table with his hands clasped together. He lowered his head and prayed devoutly, making it impossible to see his face. In front of him, there was only the light of a candle shining on him. Beside the candle was a statue of the god of light. The room was not small, but more than half of it was empty. There was only a cushion, a table, a candle, a man, and a statue in the whole room. There was also the smell of stones and dust. Suddenly, in the empty space of a room, there was a sudden burst of purple light. A complex magic circle appeared on the ground. The man in the white robe paused slightly, but he was not surprised. Instead, he skillfully and stiffly tried to turn the statue of the god of light. There was no way he could not be stiff. He had done this set of movements countless times these days. It had long been engraved in his bones and had become mechanical muscle memory. If everything was normal, a few large carts would appear from the magic circle later, full of goods. They were all amulets. Even though the man in the white robe had served the gods in the Church of Light for many years, he had never seen such a useful amulet. Not only could it give people spiritual comfort, but it could also really help people expel the cold. This was the most important resource for the human race now. So even if this magic circle emitted a purple light that symbolized ominous and evil, the man in the white robe resisted the discomfort and tried to endure it. This was also the reason why he could be here. The younger generation of the Church of Light had not really come into contact with the witches, the archenemy. In addition, the inheritance of the witches was almost cut off, leaving only Aisha, so the definition of the witches in the church had become the evil enemy of the past. So the young believers' understanding of the witches was the past, like the characters in a story, revealing a kind of unreality. But when the purple light faded, the man in the white robe suddenly stopped what he was doing. He stared at the other half of the room, at a loss. Because this time, what appeared in the magic circle was not a few carts of goods, but 3 people. And these 3 people were a little strange. One was actually red-haired, and the other was dressed like a witch. Jilin stood still and hastily looked around the room. He saw a dumb human looking at him with a dumbfounded expression. Where is this? The white-robed man was shocked. He looked around and confirmed that there was no one else around. Only then did he confirm that the red-haired youth was talking to him. This is Wind Moon City. The white-robed youth replied blankly. Jilin rolled his eyes and shook his head helplessly. This human was an idiot. Did he not know that this was Wind Moon City? Jilin's golden eyes shone brightly, and the entire Wind Moon City was in his line of sight, completely unobstructed. Ah! The white-robed man screamed. He felt as if his eyes had been burned by a strong golden light. Jilin determined where he was sitting, and with a pair of wings on his back, he soared into the sky with a whoosh. Boom, boom, boom. Wind Moon City's countless floors were smashed into a large circular hole. Moreover, the positions of these holes were perfectly aligned and perfectly straight. Like a sharp sword, it pierced through Wind Moon City from below. A beam of light descended and enveloped Bane and Aisha. Aisha looked up and also turned into a shadow and flew into the sky. Bane also looked up and turned to walk to the white-robed man. Brother, where do I get to the stairs? Staya. Breaking through Wind Moon City was only a matter of a moment for Jilin. It was also the same for confirming Staya's position. Staya was the princess that Jilin had personally captured. Jilin had naturally left countless means of knowing her position on her body. Jilin shot towards the north, leaving a long line of fire in the air as he flew through the sky. The flames burning out of thin air were extremely strange. Not only was the air burning, but Jilin's body was also burning. In the raging fire, red scales began to appear all over Jilin's body. There was also something burning in the depths of his golden eyes. He was very angry. Staya had really forced him to the point of no return. A mere human. She could finally force him to do something that he didn't want to do. The current development of the situation was definitely not what Jilin had imagined. He definitely shouldn't have appeared here now. He shouldn't have shown hostility towards the Demon King so quickly. He should have waited until the Demon King broke through the defense line of the Snow Wind Empire. He should have waited until the true human race destroyed the Saimai Empire, the Middle Empire, and the small Nanshin Empire before he took action and organized the remaining races to unite and fight against the true human race. The Beast Race, the Dwarf Race, the Sea Race, the Demon Beast Race, and the human race of the Red Dragon Empire. After winning that battle, the first four races, needless to say. As for the remaining human race, they would all be followers of the Red Dragon sect and worship him as a god. At that time, ruling the world would be a matter of course. In this way, the dragon race's plan would be successful. But Staya was clearly just a human. Boom! Jilin drew a red line of fire and fell from the sky, like a burning red meteor. The blood-red clouds that were as thick as the earth began to roll in the sky, as if it was the end of the world. The clouds follow the dragon. The wind follows the tiger. This was the appearance of the dragon race. The sky had turned blood-red, so naturally, there would be no more snow. But there were still countless cold winds blowing, rolling up the endless snowflakes on the ground and filling up the sky. Because the person with the cold wind was the Demon King. I didn't expect to meet you again so soon. Jilin ignored him and quickly glanced to the side. Not far away, there was an inconspicuous person lying in the snow. She was dressed in white armor. If not for Jilin's golden eyes, it would have been difficult to find her. Jilin took a step forward and walked to Staya's side, looking down at her. Great, this stupid woman finally played herself to death. Staya's eyes were tightly shut, apparently unconscious. Even Jilin couldn't feel her breathing. Her face was pale. His left leg and right arm were sealed in ice, like transparent armor. But Jilin had to admit that she looked okay. She didn't have any wounds. Her arms and legs weren't broken, but she wasn't breathing. The Demon King took a small step back. He could feel that Jilin was in a state of extreme anger. The fire dragon in this state was undoubtedly an active volcano that was about to erupt. Even if he wasn't afraid, it was better to walk around. You did this. Jilin slowly turned his head and looked at the Demon King. The ice and snow around him started to melt quickly. The Demon King shrugged. No, I just don't know why, but this weak creature raised her sword and charged at me, trying to kill me. I just used ice to trap her. Jilin frowned slightly. He thought that a creature at the Demon King's level wouldn't bother to lie about this. Suddenly, Jilin's eyes flashed, and he put his finger on Staya's pulse. Her veins were all broken. It was God's descent and sacrifice. Jilin understood. Staya was like this again. She already knew that she was going to die before the fight, so she used God's descent before the fight even started. She charged at the Demon King with all her might, swearing to slash with the sword that represented the dignity of humans. She put everything on this sword, but the Demon King didn't even look at her and just trapped her. After a while, Staya would die from the backlash of God's descent and sacrifice. He didn't even need to move. Staya risked her life in the end, but she didn't even manage to fight the Demon King. You don't want to give up, right? Jilin looked at Staya's pale face and thought to himself, she's one of my people, don't you know? Jilin glared at the Demon King angrily, and his dragon's might surged towards the Demon King like an ocean. Staya had too much of his aura. Even if people didn't notice, how could the Demon King not see it? I know. That's why I didn't do anything. The Demon King found it funny. Although he didn't do anything to this stupid creature for Jilin's sake, he didn't expect Jilin to be so angry over such an insignificant creature. It seemed like he wanted to fight to the death with him. The Demon King found it ridiculous. Plus, this thing could be said to be suicide, so what did it have to do with him? Huff! Jilin took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Suddenly, a large amount of heat rose from his body. Boom! Jilin flew into the sky with Staya in his arms, and a gentle white light bloomed around him. It was the mercy of the god of light. Jilin and Staya turned into a white comet in the sky, flying toward the east. The only place that could save Staya now was probably the Elven Island, but Aisha didn't set up a teleportation circle there. Chapter 395. If Aisha could use a magic array to teleport to a place, it had to be a place where she had set up a magic array before. There were no exceptions, except for the time she went to the Red Dragon Palace. That was the first time Jilin and Aisha met. That time, Jilin was truly shocked. To think that a mere human could appear in front of him without making a sound. If Jilin hadn't stabbed Aisha to death with one finger, he would have thought that there were beings stronger than him everywhere in this world. Even so, Jilin was still worried because Aisha came back to life immediately after being stabbed to death. It wasn't until he followed Aisha to the Saimai Empire and captured Staya that Jilin regained his confidence that he was invincible and that humans were ants. However, Jilin had asked more than once about the magic that Aisha used when she came to the Red Dragon Palace, and he was finally convinced that it couldn't be replicated. If so, he could only fly to the Elven Island. He didn't feel it usually, but now, the distance was too far. Jilin suddenly froze. He thought to himself, it's the same distance, but why do I feel it's farther than usual? Isn't it something that only humans do when their thoughts distort their judgment of reality? How can it be? Jilin glanced at Staya in his arms and understood. He was afraid that it would be too late. A dazzling red light flashed, and Jilin turned back into his true form. He flapped his huge wings hard and created a strong wind in the sky. Wherever it passed, the white clouds dissipated and everything retreated, leaving only the blue sky. In Jilin's palm, Staya was still wrapped in white light. From afar, it looked like a red megalosaurus was holding a white, shining star. The spring of life flowed, and the small world tree swayed gently. In the mysterious and quiet Elven Palace, the Elven Queen sat on the throne with her eyes closed. Suddenly, she raised her head and looked at the sky. Her gaze passed through the thick stone roof. In her eyes, the red megalosaurus was holding a white light in its hand as it flew towards them aggressively. Its indomitable aura was like that of a human charging towards the enemy with a self-destructing ornament. Looks like they won't stop outside the barrier. The Elven Queen thought to herself. Queen, what's wrong? The elf standing next to her hurriedly asked upon seeing the strange expression on the queen's face. Something that could make the Elven Queen react like this must be something earth-shattering. The queen's smile was like the sudden brightness of the dark moon and the blooming of 100 flowers. It's nothing. Go and tell all the elves to hide first. The queen looked at the sky. She did not intend to stop Jilin because the Elven Island was her world. If the Elf Queen wanted to kill Jilin on the Elf Island, he probably wouldn't be able to fight back. It was just a matter of whether Jilin dared to enter. To the Elven Queen's surprise, Jilin was like an arrow that could not be turned back. Without any hesitation, he rushed in through the gap that the Elven Queen had purposely opened. Boom! Jilin smashed into the Elven King's palace like a meteor. The entire Elf Island began to tremble. The Elven Palace that had been built at some point turned into rocks and was blown away. Not even a single rock was left. If it weren't for the World Tree standing there firmly and the spring of life not being affected by the wind, there would have been nothing left within a 500-meter radius. The Elven Queen, who seemed to be able to light up the entire world, could not help but frown. Standing in the hurricane that could easily blow away a stone house, not even the corner of her clothes fluttered. The queen raised her eyebrows. The hurricane suddenly stopped. On the Elf Island, she was the absolute queen. She commanded all things and did as she should. You just arrived, and you're already tearing down my house. Hearing the queen's unkind words, Jilin ignored them. The huge red dragon claw gently placed the white light in his hand on the ground in front of the queen. His movements were light and slow, as if he wanted to show the queen that he had no evil intentions. Maybe he was just afraid of waking Staya up. The queen glanced at Staya and did not look again. She already knew about Staya's situation. What do you mean? Can you save her? The queen did not ask any nonsense like, why? But she was only silent for a moment. Nikado shook his head. You can't save her. Why? You have a spring of life and the world tree. Jilin's eyes widened. He suddenly realized that there were facts in this world that he did not want to accept. The gods can also fall. They all have the spring of life. They all share the great world tree, the queen said. She's just a human, but the fact that death is irreversible is true everywhere. Is she already dead? The queen suddenly had a headache. She thought, you don't know if she's dead or not. No, right? Jilin said. But her state is very strange, right? It's not a normal near-death state. If it's that kind of injury, with the mercy of your god of light, she would have been saved by now. Jilin silently agreed. He knew that Staya was not dead, but he could not save her. He had never seen this kind of state before. There was no description of it in the inheritance of the dragon bloodline. Staya was in his hand, but he felt that she was far away from him. It was a feeling that his soul was about to leave, because this ice is very powerful. The queen pointed at the ice wrapped around Staya's arm. Jilin was stunned. He did not notice that the ice was powerful before. Now Staya was suffering from the backlash of the god's descent and sacrifice. Jilin did not believe that the queen could not see it. But the queen did not say anything, but said that the ice was very powerful. It seemed that compared to the ice, the backlash of the god's descent was just an insignificant injury. Since the queen said it was powerful, it must be very powerful. But Jilin really cannot see it, no? Jilin suddenly realized. If it was really a normal ice, how could it not melt after such a long time? A flame appeared on Jilin's finger and slowly approached Staya's arm. Ooh, the flame on Jilin's finger suddenly went out. If it was somewhere else, Jilin would be shocked. But there was nothing strange about it here. The queen could forcefully extinguish his flame here. What do you mean? Jilin looked up and asked. It's useless. The queen said in a low voice. This ice is unbreakable for humans. Because of this, the true human race is the natural enemy of humans. Although this ice is no different from normal ice to other races, it can freeze people's souls. It is now merged with Staya's soul. If you melt it, Staya's soul will also disappear. Unbreakable. Jilin suddenly felt that the Queen of the Elves' words were very accurate. Jilin's lonely expression touched the queen greatly. Even the queen had never thought that one day she would see the dragon race grieving for humans with her own eyes. It was good to be able to live for so long. She could see everything. The queen suddenly thought, I can save her, but she can only live for half a day after she wakes up. At the same time, she has to suffer the pain of her soul being gradually frozen. The queen looked at Jilin. How about it? Do you need me to do it? Chapter 396. The Elven Queen looked at Jilin with a strange light flashing in her eyes. Jilin also looked up at the Elven Queen when he heard that. He noticed the mockery in the queen's eyes. Jilin was silent for a long time. He easily realized that this was a dilemma. This was not rare, and there was nothing new about it. This was a melodramatic plot that was used too much in countless human stories. Jilin was very familiar with it. He even knew it by heart. But until today, Jilin vaguely understood why human authors love this plot so much. Because it was really unbearable. Jilin looked at Staya's pale face and his heart tightened. After a while, Jilin finally looked up and took a deep breath. He looked at the Elven Queen and said slowly, Fine. Really? Letting a person experience the feeling of death twice in a day. Even I think it's too cruel. Aren't you afraid that she has something to say to you? If you let her live for half a day, maybe she can finish what she wants to say to you and have some regrets? Jilin sneered. He thought that he saw through the Elven Queen's evil intentions. Since Staya already went to fight the Demon King, she probably had nothing to say to him. No need, I already know what she means. Jilin clenched his claws. Since Staya threatened him with her life and got what he wanted, he really had no way out. The Demon King couldn't be left alive. Staya was the princess that Jilin caught himself. A princess caught by the dragons must have a happy ending. This was Jilin's insistence, and it should be the truth. But Staya ended up like this. Jilin could only think that it was because everyone had a different understanding of happiness. Most people believe that the so-called happiness of a woman should be a handsome prince riding a white horse and reaching out his hand to her with admiration and longing in his eyes. His eyes seemed to be able to speak, telling you, "I love you," repeatedly. His love was sincere. You were touched. You smiled and put your hand on it. The two figures snuggling together became the most beautiful picture in the world. The white horse trod on the sunset and the flower fields, gradually moving away. The passers-by who were fortunate enough to witness this scene all revealed envious eyes. From then on, from morning to night, I am in you, and you are in me. This was what most people thought. Or rather, it was the monotonous and boring desire of humans. Human beings always had the same thoughts on this kind of thing, as if they were carved from the same mold. If 100 people were asked to write an ending to a fairy tale, 98 of them would probably think of something like this. The remaining 2 were people like Staya and Aisha. They were extreme in their thinking, either in the light or in the dark. What does Staya think happiness is? All the citizens of the Saimai Empire have enough to eat and warm clothes to wear. The faith of the Church of Light spread throughout the world. World peace. A flawless life, open and above board, with a clear conscience. Jilin shook his head. He felt that his guess was not far from the truth. He also felt that this woman was really stupid. Even if there was really world peace in the future, and everyone could laugh every day, what was the point of that to you? You couldn't see it. Although the world was good, that world didn't have you. Even if people would remember you and reminisce about you in the future. But so what? You couldn't feel it. Was there any meaning? There was. Jilin clenched his teeth and suddenly said in his heart. It seemed like he was answering his own question, but it was more like he was angry and stubborn. His people, his princess, he couldn't let them die in vain. She could choose to die, if she did as she wished, because that was her life. Jilin would respect it, but someone had to pay the price for her death. Just wait. Jilin wouldn't let go of a single life related to her death, because he went against the will of the Dragon Clan. Jilin grabbed Staya again. He wanted to bring her back to the Snow Wind Empire. Although the elf island looked like it was isolated from the rest of the world, it was an excellent place to bury her. But how much effort did Staya put in to move the coffin from the Saimai Empire to the Snow Wind Empire? Since Staya valued the coffin so much, Jilin had to let her use it no matter what. Not to mention that he had prepared a tombstone for her. Don't waste it. Elf Queen, sorry to disturb you. Jilin nodded slightly. Only in front of the Elf Queen would he show some of the self-restraint that a higher race should have. After Jilin finished speaking, he flapped his wings and was about to soar into the sky. Sigh, the Queen sighed. She really didn't know what the Dragon Clan was thinking. Even if she had lived for countless years, she still couldn't understand the thoughts of that race. Come down. The Queen stretched out her hand and pulled Jilin's figure, who was already in the sky. Jilin suddenly felt a sense of weightlessness. He was actually pulled down by the Queen. Jilin had never experienced something like falling from the sky, but the Dragon Clan had an extremely strong physical body and reaction speed. At the instant he was about to land on the ground, Jilin grasped that fleeting and wonderful opportunity. Jilin nimbly flipped his body in the air and didn't fall onto the ground. Elf Queen, what do you mean? Do you want me to stay? Jilin didn't expect the Queen to turn her face so quickly, but he wasn't afraid. Since he dared to come, it wasn't just because he was hot-headed. He was already prepared to fight to the death. Since you're already here, how can I let you tear down my house and leave? The Queen shrugged. Jilin's aura began to increase rapidly. His domain was fully opened, but it didn't spread. Instead, it only covered a small area around him. The entire Elf Island was the Queen's domain. Only in this way could he not be affected by the Queen's domain and fight against it. A huge red shadow began to appear behind Jilin. A red megalosaurus that looked like it was real held a huge sword that matched its size. It roared at the sky, its eyes filled with endless battle intent. That was Jilin himself. Jilin roared at the queen, as if saying, "Come and fight." Jilin roared with all his might, creating a huge shockwave. It whistled towards the queen, but it didn't move a single strand of the queen's hair. Instead, it blew away countless trees behind the queen. The queen looked back and saw a brand new road appear behind her. It appeared in the forest. It was a perfectly straight and clean path. Not to mention the trees, even the surface of the ground had been blown clean by Jilin, revealing the yellow stone ground. This might be the first road on the elf island. Because elves never walked, the queen shook her head. She didn't care about the house, but wasn't it a bit too much to uproot the trees on the elf island? A troublesome race that was born with destructive attributes. Shadows also began to appear behind the queen. The god of light, the god of darkness, the god of death, the god of life, the god of war. The dense shadows overlapped and stood behind the queen. Jilin couldn't tell how many there were. It seemed like an army, and the aura of each shadow was above Jilin's. Jilin took out the dragon scale sword and slowly put Staya into the spring of life. Jilin looked at the elf queen. He held the sword with both hands and got into a fighting stance. He had long wanted to fight the elf queen with all his strength. The megalosaurus shadow behind Jilin roared fiercely at the shadows of the gods behind the elf queen. It was as if the rebellious megalosaurus wanted to rush into the heavens and devour the gods. And the gods were indifferent and disdainful. Chapter 397. Jilin looked at the countless phantoms behind the queen. Each of those phantoms had an aura that could shatter the void. Jilin realized that he had underestimated the queen's power. The elven queen that he sensed on the elven island was completely different from the one that Jilin sensed outside the elven island. The phantoms standing behind the queen were all more powerful than him. Was this the true, strongest creature in the world that was protected by the gods? Jilin understood the difference in power between them, but he had no intention of retreating. Because after realizing the truth of Staya's death, Jilin felt a nameless fire burning in his chest. He wanted to vent it out. Moreover, there was no way for him to retreat in this place. If the elven queen could let him in, she naturally could not let him out. Whoosh! Jilin suddenly opened his mouth, and a red dragon's breath burst out in an instant. Such a sudden attack could almost be considered a sneak attack. Jilin's dragon's breath was almost as fast as the speed of light, and he was so close to the elven queen. The dragon's breath attack reached the queen in an instant, or perhaps 1,000th of a second. The time taken to blink was many times slower than that. No one in the world could dodge Jilin's sneak attack, not even the Demon King. They could only endure it. But now the elven queen could, because she was now on the elven island, and the god of time's phantom was standing behind her. The time on the elven island was under her control. Unknowingly, a white clock pattern appeared in the queen's right pupil. The 3 needles were spinning, and there were 12 scales around them. It was small and perfectly hidden in the pupil. With human vision, even if one was very close to the queen's face and looked at her right eye carefully, one could only see a small white dot in the queen's eye. However, Jilin could clearly see the 12 scales in the queen's eye. The queen raised her hand towards Jilin, and the god of time's phantom behind her also raised her hand. Under the queen's control, this 1 second was extended infinitely. Jilin's dragon breath slowed down, as if it had stopped moving. Jilin blinked and casually swung his sword, pointing the tip of his sword at the queen. Jilin had always been keen on such useless but fancy human techniques, and he could learn them in no time. The failure of the sneak attack was within Jilin's expectations. A battle of this level could only end in a life and death struggle, with blood spilling from every blade. The queen was not surprised to see that Jilin was still able to move freely in her world where time was stretched out. Not to mention that Jilin was now in his own domain. The ability of time had never been effective against the dragons who could rely solely on their physical bodies to pass through the realm walls and world cracks. Otherwise, How could the dragon race compete with the god race who had the god of time for so many years? Jilin gritted his teeth, stomped his foot, and rushed out. In fact, he had only taken one step. However, with his body size and the help of his wings, this step was enough for him to bring the elven queen into his attack range. With one step, the queen was already within his sword range. Jilin took a deep breath, concentrated all his strength on the blade, and slashed down fiercely with the power to split a mountain. Whoosh! This was not the sound that sword wind should make. However, the dragon-scale sword was too huge at this time. It was more like a smash than a slash. Like a toppling mountain, it smashed down toward the queen. If the queen had not blocked the sword, Jilin's sword was enough to sink any island in the world. The queen's expression did not change in the face of Jilin's sword. That was like a flash of lightning. The queen looked at the falling sword blade and casually shook her slender wrist. Facing the mountain-like dragon-scale sword, she waved her fist lazily, as if she did not use much strength. However, it was this understatement and carelessness that showed the queen's incomparable confidence. This scene looked extremely strange. The queen's arm was slender and white, delicate and weak. It seemed that it could be broken with a gentle twist. Such an arm could cover her arm with a white veil and some spring breeze, but it might not be able to pick up a wooden bucket full of water. However, such an arm was waving her white and tender fist to attack the supreme artifact of the dwarves, the dragon-scale sword. It was like a young lady who looked like she did not do any household chores. In front of the collapse of Mount Tai, not only did her expression not change, but she also rolled up her sleeves to reveal her white and tender arm and said to the maid behind her, "Back off. Watch me send Mount Tai flying with one punch." In such a situation, the maid would definitely think that her young lady was scared silly, and then she would quickly pull the young lady's clothes and run for her life. Unfortunately, the queen was not a young lady. Even if she was not human. Boom! An extremely shocking scene happened. The queen's white and tender little fist sent the dragon-scale sword flying with one punch. It really looked like a weak human girl who sent a mountain flying with one punch. Jilin felt a huge force coming toward him. His hands went numb, and then he could not stop trembling. When had Jilin ever experienced such a feeling? Jilin had never faced such a situation before, and Jilin had no way of learning the techniques of the sword saint's swordsmanship. Thus, Jilin's sword flew out of his hands. The dragon-scale sword was really sent flying. It spun in the air and flew far away, finally landing in the distant sea. Jilin held his trembling hands, his face full of disbelief. He, a dragon, actually lost in terms of strength? This was something that had never happened in the many years of the war between the dragons and the gods. "You don't have to be so shocked," the queen said. "Even among the gods, I am a special existence. I am a life created by the combined efforts of the gods. I can use their abilities. My upper limit is higher than theirs. I am the God King created by the combined efforts of the gods." God King, this is what the gods told me. However, this is not very accurate. In my opinion, I am just a weapon created by the gods to fight against a life that they cannot fight against. A life that the gods cannot fight against. What do you have to doubt? Of course, it is the dragon of dragons, the Black Dragon King. Jilin held his breath. Even if you're really strong, you are still too far away from the Black Dragon King. Jilin did not believe this. As he spoke, he threw a powerful punch at the Elven Queen. The dragon race had never lost in terms of physical strength. TSK. The queen shook her head. Dragons like to get carried away when they fought, so they couldn't see the situation clearly. That is because I'm still growing and have not reached my upper limit. Otherwise, why would I be on this elven island? The queen threw another punch. This punch met Jilin's dragon fist. Boom! With a loud bang, Jilin was sent flying. The elven queen looked up at Jilin, who was flying high in the sky, and sighed softly. She was not the only one who was still growing. Chapter 398. Jilin's mind was in a daze as he flew in a parabola in the sky. He could not imagine how the Elven Queen's slender wrist could contain such immense power. a power that could suppress a dragon. After this punch, Jilin knew in his heart that there was no way he could defeat the Elven Queen at the moment. When a dragon loses to an opponent in terms of strength, there was no such record in Jilin's bloodline inheritance, so he did not know what to do. But all he could do now was fight to the death. Splash! Jilin's huge body fell into the sea, creating huge waves. Jilin stood up from the sea and suddenly felt a sharp pain coming from his right hand. Jilin turned his head to look. His right hand was not broken, but it hurt a lot. He guessed that the punch from the Elven Queen had hurt his bone. But fortunately, Jilin knew healing magic, the light god's mercy. With a flash of white light, Jilin's arm recovered. For a dragon, this was not a serious injury. Jilin raised his hand, and the dragon scale sword immediately flew out from the sea and into Jilin's hand. This was the power of a divine weapon that merged with the soul. Jilin looked at the Elven Queen who appeared on the shore and took a deep breath in his heart. Dragonung magic, end of fire. This was the only Dragonung magic that Jilin knew. It could burn all elements in the domain into nothingness. But within the range of this elven island, Jilin could only cover his entire body with the domain. Now Jilin's entire body was wrapped in the strongest magic. Everything that touched Jilin would be burned into nothingness. On the other hand, everything that Jilin touched would also be burned, shrinking the domain to an extremely small area. The Elven Queen looked at Jilin's current state and finally felt that it was a little tricky. But this is just a little trick. The Elven Queen's tone was slightly disdainful. This was because Jilin's method of using the domain was not the right way. A battle between domains was a battle that only god-level existences would fight. Normally, they would clash openly with each other to see whose domain was bigger and stronger. There was no one like Jilin. Sometimes, petty tricks like this can be very useful, Jilin said. After Jilin finished speaking, he did not say anything else. He wanted to quickly swing his sword at the queen. Jilin believed that even the Elven Queen would be severely injured as long as the sword landed on her. Jilin wouldn't be able to maintain the draconic magic state for long. Enough. The sudden voice of the Elven Queen caused Jilin's body that was ready to strike to pause for a moment. That's enough. The queen said, Steve just passed away. I can understand your feelings, so I'll acquiesce if you want to fight. However, if you continue to fight, I can't guarantee that I'll be able to control my strength. Jilin fell silent. Of course, he could feel that the Elven Queen was holding back during the previous battle. However, he did not want to admit it. However, now that the Elven Queen had said it herself, he had no choice but to believe it. Why? Jilin did not understand. In Jilin's impression, the queen was very unfriendly to dragons. When they first met, she shot him with an arrow without saying anything. Why was she holding back now? Because I think you're really different from other dragons. We're not enemies. The queen's words gave Jilin a huge sense of absurdity. He was the son of the Fire Dragon King and the Golden Dragon King. He had the orthodox dragon bloodline. The queen was the product of the gods. She could be said to be the purest god. If the two of them were not enemies, there would probably be no disputes in the entire universe. The reason why the gods and dragons did not fight and each stayed in one place was because no one was sure that they would win. I know it's hard for you to accept, the queen said, but I have no reason to lie to you now. You're not a real dragon, and I'm not a real god. I'm an elf. I'm a dragon. There are no dragons in this world who practice swordsmanship, no dragons who turn into humans and run around, and no dragons who grieve over the death of humans. Even though your body is that of a dragon, your heart is very different from that of a normal dragon. Jilin could not refute it for a while. Then, what's the meaning of you not being a real god? The gods see the world as ants. It's their work, but I see them as real life. Jilin did not dare to speak. He seemed to understand the Elven Queen's words, but he also seemed to not understand. It was like when you were discussing with your friend what to eat tonight, and your friend suddenly talked about things like life and ideals. Anyone would be caught off guard, and it would take a while for the brain to react. That's why I'm trapped on this island and can't get out. I can only watch you unintentionally dismantle the great array that covers the world and put in the shadow of the god of darkness. Jilin wanted to say that he was actually used by Aisha, but when the words came to his mouth, he realized that it was not easy to say. Why did the gods trap you here? They said that I was just born and was not stable. They wanted me to see the destruction of the world, and then I would naturally become indifferent to the death of life, and my state of mind would become like them. The destruction of the world. Everything has an end, and every world will eventually be destroyed. Then why trap you here? Because as long as I'm here, this world will not be destroyed. Jilin was speechless at the Elven Queen's unparalleled confidence for a while. I have friends in this world. Although they're all dead, I still want to protect the world that they lived in. What about you? The Elven Queen took Staya out of the spring of life and tidied up her messy wet hair. Jilin looked at Staya, and the anger in his chest rose again. He suddenly felt that the Elven Queen was living a free and easy life, daring to go against the gods. He also wanted to do something for Staya, just like the Elven Queen, but he knew that it would not work. This world would eventually be destroyed in his hands. He would grow until he could break through this world, and he still had the mission given to him by the dragons. If he failed, the dragons could only follow their old path. After countless years, the Black Dragon King would destroy the entire universe. No matter what, he could not stand on the same side as the Queen. I cannot protect this world. Jilin turned back into his human form. He turned into an ordinary-looking young man with red hair and golden eyes. It was a strong contrast to the beautiful Elven Queen. Jilin walked to Staya's side and squatted down, putting his fingers on Staya's neck. Feeling the cold and silent body, Jilin's teeth chattered. Since the gods created humans, why did they create humans to be so weak and have such a short life? Jilin asked softly. I don't understand either. That's why I don't listen to the gods' arrangements, the Queen replied softly. Why do you have to follow the orders of the dragons? Chapter 399. Jilin blinked his eyes. The Elven Queen's words did not affect Jilin, nor did it explode in Jilin's heart like a thunderclap. Because Jilin could give the Elven Queen 100 perfect answers to this question. Why do I have to follow the Dragon Clan's wishes? Because Jilin is a dragon, and Jilin's parents are also dragons. Dragons are good. Jilin is good too. This is all nonsense, because this is how it should be. Just like humans, some people may betray the Middle Empire and join the Simi Empire, and they may also betray the Simi Empire and join the Snowwind Empire. However, no one will betray humans and join the orcs. Of course, special situations like the orcs holding a knife to a human's neck are exceptions. Jilin thinks that he is many times more advanced than humans. Even if there is something holding a knife to his neck, he can't betray the Dragon Clan. I only want to kill the Demon King. I want to burn all the humans to death. As for the rest, I don't care. Jilin was disturbed by the Elven Queen's words, so he decided not to think about her words anymore. He began to think about what he wants to do. I didn't expect your thoughts to be so tangled. The Elven Queen was surprised by Jilin's attitude. It seems that the Dragon Clan really entrusted you with an important task. Tell me, what did the Dragon Clan ask you to do? Jilin was stunned, thinking that this kind of thing can be casually told to you. The Dragon Clan asked me to save this universe. Jilin tried to make it sound as convincing as possible, as if he was obviously lying to you. But after the Elven Queen heard this, her eyes flashed, and she began to ponder. So the Dragon Clan has seen it with their own eyes. The Elven Queen's low voice made Jilin feel a chill. You? What do you mean? The Elven Queen looked at Jilin and smiled. It's the matter that the Black Dragon King will eventually burst the universe. Jilin held his breath, and countless scales appeared on his human hand. He couldn't hide his excitement. He had only just found out about this. How did the Elven Queen know about this? It was impossible for the Dragon Clan to spread the news everywhere. I know. Why are you so surprised? The Elven Queen said, this matter is not considered a secret among the Protoss. In fact, the Protoss had already expected this many years ago, even earlier than the dragons. How is that possible? Jilin said. Why not? The Elven Queen said, isn't there a saying among humans? The one who knows you best is usually your enemy, not yourself. Only your enemies would spend so much effort to research you day and night. The god race had long since memorized the Tao that the dragon race walked. They had even deduced it countless times. The god race has long known the end of the dragon race's path. The god race already knew? Jilin couldn't believe it. If the god race already knew, how could the Black Dragon King not know? If the Black Dragon King had known earlier, how could he have chosen this path? That's because we have different views. The Elven Queen said, "Every Tao has countless branches. The Dragon Clan reaching where they are today is only one of the many possibilities. The truth is locked in. As time passed, what was originally possible became inevitable. The Black Dragon King originally imagined that he would escape from this universe, just like how he broke out of hell. In the Black Dragon King's view, there were infinite universes in this world at the same time. This universe was only one of many universes. Outside this universe, there would be a higher world containing the endless universe. However, the god race firmly believed that this universe was the highest world, and there was no other world besides it. Once the boundary wall of this universe was destroyed, it would cause the Great Destruction. In fact, it was the same thing. It was just that the Black Dragon King thought in a good direction, while the god race thought in the worst direction because of their standpoint. Unfortunately, the god race was right. What do you mean? What I mean is, since the god race already knew about this, they wouldn't have no countermeasures. Then, whether you follow the Dragon Clan's wishes or not, the universe will not be destroyed. Since that's the case, why don't you follow your own heart? In fact, you have long realized that even the humans who are like ants in your eyes are also precious lives, even if they disappear in the blink of an eye. On this point, you and I have the same view. Why don't we join forces? Together, we will rebel against the Dragon Clan, rebel against the god race, and let all the lives in this world live according to their own wishes, truly and freely for a lifetime, instead of being manipulated by fate that they are completely unaware of. Jilin's mouth opened slightly because he was too surprised, but he didn't realize it. Now he truly understood why the Elven Queen was trapped here and even set up with the God's Covenant. This woman was simply a traitor of the god race. She was in a small world. The gods couldn't enter and couldn't do anything to her, so they could only trap her. Then, what is the god race's countermeasure? Jilin asked in a low voice. "It's me," the queen said proudly. The Elven Queen said proudly. The solution to this problem is very simple. Just destroy the Black Dragon King before he breaks the universe. Wishful thinking. Jilin was furious. The Black Dragon King doesn't even need 2 hands to crush you to death. The Black Dragon King was the origin of the Dragon Clan, the object of worship of all dragons, the great dragon of dragons. Now that the Elven Queen said in front of him that she wanted to destroy the Black Dragon King, how could he not be angry? But compared to anger, Jilin was more disdain. The Black Dragon King's strength was above all dragons. The Dragon King's authority was bestowed by the Black Dragon King. It was easy for the Elven Queen to fight Jilin, but it wasn't enough to fight against the Dragon King. What more the Black Dragon King? I know that the Dragon Clan blindly worships the Black Dragon King. The Elven Queen's gaze toward Jilin suddenly became malicious. But in fact, the Dragon Clan and the Black Dragon King are not the same species. The Black Dragon King only looks like a dragon. Or rather, the original Dragon Clan was created by the Black Dragon King based on himself. Just like how God created humans based on his own appearance. God and humans may look like each other, but they are not the same thing. Just like the stone monkey in the story. Do you think he can be considered a monkey? The Dragon Clan is made of flesh and blood. Other than the original Dragon Clan, the later ones were all born from their parents, so you guys are real living creatures. But the Black Dragon King is not. He is the first dragon born in hell. He is formed from all the negative energy of disaster, destruction, disease, malice, death, etc. He is not a living creature. He is born naturally, just like the stone monkey. I know what you said. I am more familiar with the birth of the Black Dragon King than you. Isn't the Dragon Clan's bloodline inheritance? Why are you suddenly saying this? I'm just reminding you, the Black Dragon King is not related to you by blood. You don't have to have such a big resistance when I want to kill him. Am I resisting? I think you are overestimating yourself. Jilin was shocked. He suddenly felt that the Elven Queen's brain was not working well. Chapter 400. You don't have to worry about how I'm going to kill the Black Dragon King. I still need some time to fully mature. That's countless years later. You only need to think about what's happening now. Right now, Jilin lowered his head and looked at Staya. His heart tightened, but Jilin still shook his head. This was a huge matter that concerned the entire universe, and also concerned Jilin himself. He couldn't just listen to the Elf Queen's one-sided words. If the Black Dragon King broke through the universe, all life would die under the destruction. The dragons were no exception. Jilin himself was no exception. This was an obvious thing. If the Black Dragon King could protect the entire dragon race, then wouldn't it be better to bring the entire dragon race out of the universe? As for the other life forms, according to the dragon race, what did that have to do with him? So this was a huge matter that concerned his life. How could Jilin not be cautious? Now that the Elf Queen said she could defeat the Black Dragon King, Jilin didn't believe it even if he put aside his standpoint. Even if the Queen was really invincible in the future and could really become the God King, she had never fought with the Black Dragon King. How could she say she could defeat the Black Dragon King? Just based on the illusory speculations of the gods. If the gods could believe that the entire universe could become better. First, I can't believe you. Jilin looked at the Queen and said, no one in the entire universe dares to say they can definitely win against the Black Dragon King. Even if you're really stronger than the Black Dragon King, battles are always full of accidents. What if you lose, the entire universe will be destroyed again? This is a huge matter that concerns the entire universe. I can't put all my eggs in one basket and put all my hopes on you. Second, if you really kill the Black Dragon King, who knows if the gods will let you kill the entire dragon race? There aren't many dragons anyway. If you really have the ability to defeat the Black Dragon King, it won't be difficult for you. I swear in the name of the elf race that what you said won't happen. Why not? Or rather, this is the most likely thing to happen. You kill the Black Dragon King, but there will be dragons that can reach the same height as him. There will also be dragons that have the possibility of breaking through the universe. What will you do then? When a dragon grows to that level, will you kill every dragon you see? At that time, the entire dragon race would live under your shadow. Wouldn't that be the most humiliating thing for the dragon race? Wouldn't it be better for you to deal with them in one go? As I said before, you and the Black Dragon King are not the same species. It should be very difficult for you to reach the Black Dragon King's level. Who knows what will happen in the future? Then, what reliable solution does the Dragon Clan have? The Queen finally asked the most important question. Jilin hesitated for a moment. The Black Dragon King feels that your god race's Tao is quite stable. The Black Dragon King wants to replace him. He wants to be a god. He doesn't want to, but he has no choice. The Queen suddenly stood up. Absolutely not. Why? The Black Dragon King is the amalgamation of all destruction and destruction in the universe. If we let him rule the heaven realm, the entire universe will fall into an era even darker than the Chaos Era. Jilin sighed. It seems that you don't agree with the dragon race's method, and the dragon race won't agree with the god race's method either. It seems that there's no need to continue this conversation. At least in a short period of time, neither of us can convince the other. Jilin picked up Staya and looked at the Queen. Can I go now? What are you going to do? Bury her first, then kill the Demon King. You don't have the ability to defeat the Demon King. Then do you want to help me with an arrow? It's been so long. You should be able to shoot another arrow, right? If I can't stop that guy, I'm afraid you don't have to protect this world anymore. It seems that we have the same idea in the short term. The Queen waved her hand, and a gap appeared in the barrier that covered the Elf Island. Jilin flew out of the gap with Staya in his arms. He didn't fly very fast because he wasn't ready to announce the death of the Holy Queen to the world. The Elf Queen looked at Jilin's flying figure and shook her head regretfully. Staya was someone she had high hopes for. She was righteous and pure, like the light. She had the holy sword and was the saintess of the light. She soaked in the spring of life and inherited the power of the first saintess and the hero. In time, she might become someone who could rival Jilin. This was a chess piece that the queen had secretly arranged, a trump card that she had left behind. Unfortunately, she died too early. Speaking of which, there weren't many first saintesses like her. Before a single wrinkle could grow on their face, it was gone. Heroes like them always stood in front of everyone to face danger. They stood alone in front of the world and fought against the incoming storm. That was why they always died so easily and quickly. Sometimes they couldn't get the understanding of the people they were protecting, because they stood in front of everyone, and the people behind them couldn't see them at all. They couldn't see what they had done. They could only hear the people in front saying that someone had died and that he had been swallowed by the storm. The people behind them wouldn't think that he had died because of them. They would only think that this person was too careless. Why were you standing in front of them in such a heavy rain? Jilin came out of the Elf Island and flew directly to the Wind Moon City. Although the humans were heavily guarded, they couldn't stop Jilin at all, until Jilin landed on the rooftop of the Wind Moon City with Staya in his arms. The soldiers who were in charge of sentry duty were shocked. The origin of this person who fell from the sky was unknown. How did he appear here? The surrounding soldiers rushed up with weapons and surrounded Jilin. Who is it? Don't move. Look, the one he's holding is... It's the Holy Queen. It's the Red Disaster. Among the soldiers, a soldier suddenly looked at Jilin and began to tremble violently. He couldn't hold the spear in his hand firmly. Bang! He fell to the ground. This was a soldier who had participated in the Battle of Snowfire and was lucky enough to see Jilin's human form with his own eyes. At that time, it was this ordinary-looking red-haired boy, wearing the same clothes, who stood on the moving city and fought 5 legends alone. It wasn't until he was sneak-attacked by the Sword Saint and his arm was cut off that he transformed into a megalosaurus. Why is the Red Disaster here? Wasn't he killed by the Holy Queen? I saw it with my own eyes. The soldier's head was in a daze. But after all, he had been through hundreds of battles and could still calm down. Quick, sound the alarm. The soldier shouted, and at the same time grabbed a young soldier beside him and said, "Go and inform His Majesty. The Red Disaster is here. Tell His Majesty, run." After the soldier finished speaking, he pushed his colleague away. He turned around and rushed toward Jilin without even picking up the spear at his feet. He knew that there was no difference whether he took the spear or not. Only a legendary powerhouse could barely exchange 2 blows with the Red Disaster. What did he do? The reason he rushed over was because he hoped to delay the Red Disaster for a second or two so that the Iron Blood King would have a higher chance of escaping. Jilin looked at the empty-handed soldier rushing toward him. For some reason, his eyes felt a bit sore. Humans, why would they take the initiative to give up their lives? Is this something that living beings can do? Staya, what do you think? Chapter 401. Why would humans take the initiative to give up their lives? Jilin felt that Staya had the right to answer this question. In the past, Staya would probably talk to Jilin about the light, the country, and the common people, and talk to him for half a day. That was enough to make a megalosaurus impatient. And it was basically Staya talking and Jilin listening. But now, Staya would no longer respond to any of Jilin's questions. Was this death? When a person died, his family and friends would not immediately accept this reality, and they would still feel that his death was unreal. They felt that he was still alive and had not gone far. They had not been able to adapt to a world without him. Until one day, when they really wanted to say something to him, or do something with him, when they really thought of him, they would truly feel that he was dead. His death would truly hurt them, and make them realize that this world would always have one less person they knew, and they would eventually leave this world. Jilin was absent-minded, which was rare. In the past, Jilin felt that absent-mindedness was simply because the human brain had not evolved enough. But now he knew that this was the case. Just as Jilin was stunned, the empty-handed soldier had already rushed in front of Jilin. He gritted his teeth and raised his fist. It looked like he wanted to punch Jilin's face, and he was about to succeed. If this scene could be frozen here, or painted by someone, it would be enough to make this soldier proud for the rest of his life. He could very well take out this painting and show it off to everyone in an exaggerated manner. People would show a look of amazement and applaud him, because what he was doing now was what the king of fighters, Muzin, wanted to do, but Muzin's fist had never been as close to Jilin's face as he was now. The soldier did not expect that he would be able to rush so close to the red disaster, and he regretted that he did not bring a spear. If he had that spear in his hand, he would have been able to stab the red disaster. The soldier was suddenly excited because this was the red disaster. He was about to meet him. The soldier's head began to heat up, and his body began to tremble slightly. Previously, it was because of fear, but now it was because of excitement. His blood began to boil in his veins. He had never felt that the Snow Wind Empire was so warm. He felt that the thick cotton-padded clothes on his body were somewhat redundant. He even started to sweat, until Jilin suddenly glanced at him. Jilin didn't even move his head. He just rolled his eyes and glanced at him. The soldier suddenly realized that he couldn't move. He couldn't even control a single finger. The soldier's hot body suddenly turned cold, freezing him to the bone. He was like a person who was running in thin clothes on a winter day. He was sweating profusely, and there were even ice beads on his hair. His whole body was emitting white steam. In the end, just as he stopped to catch his breath, a basin of ice water was suddenly poured over his head. The fact that the soldiers didn't pass out was already a sign that they were physically and mentally strong. When Jilin's golden eyes lit up slightly, none of the humans on the rooftop could still stand. The majestic dragon might permeated the sky above Snow City, so thick that it was almost tangible. It pressed down on everyone's shoulders and heads. The soldiers couldn't resist the weight and could only crawl on the ground helplessly. "Get up." Jilin looked at the soldier at his feet. The empty-handed soldier suddenly felt that his body was light, as if a mountain had suddenly been removed from his body. He was now extremely close to Jilin. He could see Jilin's toes if he raised his eyelids a little, but he didn't dare to move. What was pressing on his heart was more than just Jilin's dragon might. "Get up." It wasn't until Jilin said it again that the empty-handed soldier slowly stood up. "Do you know me?" Jilin looked at the ordinary human in front of him and didn't know when he had seen him. I have seen you before." The soldier's words stuttered. He had the courage to charge into the red disaster empty-handed and sacrifice his life, but he was not prepared to talk to Jilin. "Do you want to die?" Jilin said. The soldier stuttered for a long time and didn't say a word, but even Jilin could see from his expression that he didn't want to die. "Since you don't want to die, why did you still rush up? Do you think you could defeat me?" This was a rare joke from Jilin, but the soldier couldn't tell. He just felt that he was going to die soon. "Okay." Jilin nodded to him and said in a kind tone, "You are very similar to her. What's your name?" "What?" The soldier was so surprised that he didn't react for a while. Was he being asked for his name by the red disaster? The soldier didn't know why, but he suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of honor, as if he was enveloped in light at this moment, bathing his whole body in glory. It was as if he had completed a great feat and was admired by tens of thousands of people. The soldier felt that even if he had really died at the hands of the red disaster for the Empire, the honor he received would definitely not be comparable to what he had just received. In fact, this was the first time that Jilin had taken the initiative to ask for a human's name. But the human didn't answer him for a long time. The reason why Jilin treated this human differently was because Jilin felt that he was very similar to Staya, who had just died not long ago. Even if in the eyes of the world, the two of them had no similarities. One was the holy queen at the peak of humanity. The other was an unknown, ordinary soldier. One was peerless and radiant. The other was ordinary and blended into the crowd. However, the courage to rush to the front, to sacrifice himself, and to attack him was enough for Jilin to classify this person as the same type of person as Staya. "Name? You don't have one?" Jilin asked. "I do." The soldier lowered his head slightly. "Florin Ariza." Jilin was slightly stunned. He had never heard of such a long name. In fact, this name was definitely not long, but most of the humans whose names Jilin knew were the top elites of humanity. Under normal circumstances, they could directly represent their surnames. Other than the Nanshin Empire and the Middle Empire, most nobles would only use their surnames when they introduced themselves to strangers. This was to tell the person on the other side that he was not facing an individual, but a powerful family. This was the case with strangers, not to mention with Jilin, who was a life form of another race. There was even less of a need to report their name. Do I still have to be friends with you? Jilin didn't know about this rule. Because the three people around him were very special, Staya couldn't represent the royal family at the time. Plus, she was the Holy Maiden of Light. She couldn't only represent the royal family. So Staya usually just reported her name. Bane had no parents since he was young, so his name was randomly given by his neighbors. He was called Bane and didn't have a proper surname. As for Aisha, her name was a fake name that she came up with more than 180 years ago, and after using it for so many years, it became real. Even the Pope didn't know what Aisha's real name was. But it wasn't important to the two of them. Jilin nodded. Okay, I'll remember it. The soldier swallowed. He was flattered, and his eyes were full of thoughts. What did I do to deserve this? Now, I need you to do me a favor. Help me call the third prince here. Chapter 4:02. Ariza heard Jilin's words clearly, but he did not move, even though he could move freely now. Because Ariza could not understand the logic behind Jilin's actions. Why did he ask him to look for the human emperor in such an amiable tone? His tone was so natural, as if they had known each other for many years, and he was only asking him to do a trivial thing. Could it be that in the mind of the Red Disaster, as long as he knew his name, he would be considered one of his people? Could it be that after saying a few words to him, he would become his companion? No, that couldn't be. No matter what, Ariza was still a soldier of the Snow Wind Empire. He could still grasp things like his position. Forgive me for refusing. Ariza clenched his teeth and looked at Jilin. His voice was low but very clear. While saying this, Ariza was already prepared to go to heaven in the next second. Fortunately, Jilin did not know what he was thinking at this time. Otherwise, based on the knowledge he learned from Staya about the Church of Light, coupled with his poisonous tongue influenced by Aisha, he would directly tell Ariza that he had already lost the right to go to heaven. Okay then, Jilin said. I didn't want to scare you. Ariza did not expect Jilin's answer to be like this. He looked at Jilin with a shocked expression, as if he had seen a wild wolf eating meat with its head buried in the grass. Ariza had seen Jilin's peerless ferocity before. At that time, Jilin could kill gods and Buddhas in his way. He could slaughter millions of people without a single ripple in his heart. He just did not know what kind of changes had happened in the past 2 years. This dragon's personality had actually changed. Had he become so easy to talk to? But in any case, he felt that he had saved his life. All of a sudden, Ariza's eyes were filled with fear. Jilin's eyes were glowing faintly in his widened eyes. Ariza did not know what Jilin wanted to do, but every movement of the Red Disaster was enough to scare him. This was enough reason for the entire human race to be terrified. Jilin was gathering the elements. He wanted to stimulate the defense system of the mobile city and let the defense system of the city operate on its own. This way, the third prince would naturally come to him. However, the first person Jilin waited for was not the third prince, but Bane. This result surprised Jilin. It took him a full 3 seconds to react. The people who came first, whether it was the third young master or Aisha, were easy to deal with. But Bane, he shouldn't have such keen insight. Jilin did not understand why Bane was the first to arrive. It was because he was weak and he was deliberately restraining himself. Bane shouldn't have realized that he was back so quickly. Jilin's wrong judgment this time was because he neglected the biggest factor that he loved to neglect: human emotions. Human beings are emotional creatures. Most of the time, humans' actions are unreasonable because they follow their emotions. Once humans succumb to their emotions, they become unreasonable. Between rationality and emotions, humans can only choose one. Just like the Sword Saint, Guy Mingwei. The Sword Saint had always been observant, and his sword heart was clear. Logically speaking, there should be nothing in this world that he could not see through and understand. However, the Sword Saint would also act irrationally. The Sword Saint's sister, Gai Minjing, died not long after marrying into the imperial palace. The Sword Saint insisted that his sister was killed by Li Zhang. He guarded the flowing light sword at the entrance of the imperial palace for several decades, making Li Zhang not dare to leave the imperial palace for several decades. No matter what ironclad evidence the Middle Empire presented, the Sword Saint did not even look at it. In fact, did the Sword Saint not know that no one in the Middle Empire dared to harm his sister? He just did not want to know. This kind of contradictory and unreasonable behavior was Jilin's biggest doubt about human beings. So he did not know why Bane was the first to appear here. In fact, the reason was very simple. Because Bane was the first to see it. Bane was the first to see Jilin's figure descending from the sky. Since Jilin flew to the Elf Island with Staya and Bane returned to the snow-blowing city, he had been looking up at the eastern sky. The soldiers guarding the city stood on high ground, standing in the wind and snow, looking down from above. They would not be on guard against the enemy descending from the sky, and their eyes would not be on the sky. But Bane was different. He knew that Jilin would fly back from the eastern sky sooner or later with exciting news. Because ever since he met Jilin, Jilin had never disappointed Bane. So he had been staring at the eastern sky, his eyes unblinking. So he was the first to see Jilin. Seeing the humanoid figure descending from the sky, Bane was very excited. He was full of joy and could not wait to fly to the highest rooftop of the Wind Moon City. He wanted to hear the news he wanted to hear from Jilin's mouth. He thought it was natural for him to hear the news, until he saw Staya in Jilin's arms. Bane suddenly realized what Ariza had felt before. Running in the cold winter, the sweaty man was suddenly doused with a basin of cold water. That kind of cold, as if even the blood had been frozen into ice, pierced Bane's body and made him feel very painful. Bane's joy was instantly frozen, just like the cold wind on the northernmost ice field passing through the Middle Empire in spring. Bane's keen mind and years of tempering allowed him to judge the general situation in an instant. Jilin had never held a person on the ground in a human form, and Staya would never allow Jilin to hold her like this, but he didn't want to believe it. Jilin, why are you still holding Staya? She's not in the sky. Put her down. Bane's voice had completely changed, as if it was another person speaking. He opened his mouth and said something that he didn't even know what it was. Staya was cured so quickly. The Elf Queen is really amazing. You're also very powerful. Jilin raised his eyebrows. If Bane had a trace of rationality left, he would know that he should never say this. Staya was already dead, but he was still saying that Jilin and the Queen were powerful. No matter how one looked at it, these words were blatant mockery and insult. Fortunately, although Jilin was angry, he didn't argue with him. Jilin could understand Bane's feelings because they felt the same way. Jilin, who suddenly realized this, was shocked. He could actually feel the same way as a human. Jilin, Staya, Bane was still talking. Jilin walked towards Bane with Staya in his arms. Bane suddenly became nervous. Every time Jilin took a step towards him, Bane would hurriedly take 3 or 4 steps back. It was as if the one walking towards him was not Jilin with Staya in his arms, but 100 enemies with sharp knives. No, perhaps to Bane, the current Jilin was more terrifying than 100 enemies that wanted to kill him. Because Jilin now seemed to represent the reality that Bane didn't want to accept, but had to face in the end. Nothing could make people feel more desperate than reality, because humans rarely had the chance to change it. Bane retreated again and again. But how big could the rooftop of the Wind Moon City be? It didn't take long for Bane to finally retreat to the wall. Behind him was the abyss built by humans, and in front of him was the reality that he didn't want to accept step by step. He had no way to retreat. "Stop," Bane suddenly said with a trembling voice. The voice was so desperate and helpless that it was more like a request than a talk. Jilin actually stopped. This was no different from a miracle for Bane. Bane was finally able to catch his breath. He sat on the ground as if he was paralyzed. He buried his head between his knees and wrapped his arms tightly around his head. There was no space left. He hid in a fortress called himself, as if he could be stronger this way. "Is she dead?" Chapter 4:03. Jilin's casual ah sounded. Bane's curled up body shook. Bane didn't say anything because he didn't know what to say, and also because he didn't want to say anything. This could be said to be an unforeseen accident. Although it was a bit awkward to say it, it was exactly this kind of awkwardness that was very human. This kind of awkwardness appeared because of the emotional way humans thought. Staya fought the Demon King alone. The difference in strength was huge. Others didn't know, but Bane should know it. Bane knew that the Demon King and Jilin fought to a draw. In fact, it was natural for Staya to be killed by the Demon King. It was natural for Bane to be stabbed to death by the Sword Saint. But thoughts like, Staya will really die, never appeared in Bane's mind for even a second. Because in Bane's mind, Staya would never die. How could she die? She was caught by Jilin, but she didn't die. She was so good, so bright, so dazzling. She was simply the most devout and perfect believer of the God of Light. If she died like this, would there be any justice in this world? Would the God of Light still be trustworthy? Bane's body trembled. His heart was full of cursing and swearing at the world and the gods. She's gone like this? I can't talk to her or listen to her talk anymore. He could no longer see her confident smile and her long hair that was as dazzling as gold. I can't see her anymore. What? He clearly had a lot of things to say to her, a lot of things to do with her. He couldn't do anything. For the rest of his life, everything related to Staya could only be regretful. Why? Bane didn't look up. He still buried his head in his arms, but his voice sounded like he had just cried. What? Why? Didn't you bring Staya to the Elven Island? Didn't the Elven Queen have the Spring of Life? Didn't that thing claim to be able to restore a person to their original state as long as they were still breathing? Wasn't it able to bring the dead back to life? Why? Why didn't you save her? Bane's voice gradually turned into a shout towards the end. He still did not raise his head. However, Jilin could see that his neck had turned red. The veins on his neck were visible, and the fabric around his knees was wet. Jilin glanced at the girl in his arms. Jilin didn't know how humans differentiated and defined girl and woman. However, Jilin decided to call Staya that way for the time being because it sounded nice. Why couldn't he save her? Because when she arrived at the Elven Island, she was already half dead. This was because reviving the dead and regrowing the bones was just an exaggerated rhetoric used by humans. According to the humans, the Holy Grimoire of Light could also save Staya, but in reality, it didn't. This was because the Demon King's ice was very troublesome for humans. Even Elf Queen was helpless against it. Jilin could easily give many answers to Bane's questions. But Jilin didn't say anything because he already understood. Some questions didn't need an answer at all. They only needed to be asked. Jilin also wanted to ask Bane's questions about this world. Why did people die so easily, as if they didn't leave any traces in this world? But when he thought of those humans who died under his dragon flames, Jilin swallowed this question. He had no right to question the death of humans, but Bane and Jilin both ignore problem. Believing that a person wouldn't die was the most unreasonable and willful thing in the world. The rest was not worth mentioning. Jilin didn't want to answer Bane's question, so he remained silent. But he couldn't keep silent. I know it's hard for you to accept this reality. Jilin looked at Bane and said, but since it's reality, you have to accept it sooner or later. There's no other way. Bane finally raised his head and looked at Jilin. He was surprised that a dragon would say something so powerless and helpless. He was like a middle-aged man whose life wasn't going well. He couldn't resist the pressure of life and had nowhere to run. He could only convince himself to accept it. Bane suddenly sneered in his mind. He suddenly felt that reality was really awesome. It could really force people to do anything. It can even force shit into your mouth when needed. And you only had two choices, either chew it or swallow it. But this was a feeling that only humans would have. Jilin, aren't you a dragon? Aren't you a race that has the ability to change reality? Bane looked at Jilin coldly through his hazy, tear-filled eyes. His gaze was still as sharp as a knife, even through his gentle tears. He suddenly grabbed a handful of snow from the wall behind him and threw it at Jilin. The force and strength of the throw made it seem like he wasn't throwing snow, but a hidden weapon to take the head of his father's murderer. He threw it accurately. The snowball hit Jilin's shoulder. Even though it scattered, it didn't splash Staya at all. It's all your fault. Why are you pretending to be innocent and sad? Aren't these things within your expectations? You already knew that Staya would die. You even carved a tombstone for her. Baines said, if you went to find Staya earlier instead of playing with that stone, she wouldn't have had the chance to fight the Demon King. Anyone who heard Baines' words would feel that it was too much. Jilin also tried his best to keep Staya alive, but he was too late. Jilin wasn't responsible for Staya's death. When a person dies, you have to blame the person who killed them, not the person next to you why you didn't save them. But only Jilin didn't think so. He thought Bane was right. All of this was the result of his indulgence and hesitation. For him, he did have many opportunities to save Staya, but due to various reasons, he didn't do that. You're right. Staya's death was partly due to my acquiescence, but I don't think I was wrong. I just respected Staya's choice as an intelligent creature. She chose to die, and I think it was a great choice. Humans? No. Any creature doesn't have the ability to choose to live. Even though they don't have the freedom to live, they can choose to die freely. But there are very few creatures who make this great choice. Most of the creatures died passively, including me. Our death is as unfree as our life. However, Staya chose to die voluntarily and freely. I thought that this was a choice that surpassed my own. Why do I have to stop her? I can only respect her, watch her leave, and vent my dissatisfaction on the world without her. You should respect Staya's great choice. Jilin looked at Bane and said seriously. His eyes seemed to be trying to convey something. Bane didn't feel anything. He just thought it was ridiculous. From the bottom of his heart, he felt that the Red Dragon sect that believed in Jilin was a F***king evil cult. Bane, who once believed in the God of Light, had this simple conclusion about the problem of faith. What was the difference between an evil cult and an orthodox religion like the Church of Light? Orthodox faiths forbid their believers from committing suicide in their doctrines. Whether it was an evil cult or an orthodox religion, they all described the world after death as beautiful. People with real faith believed in the world described in their faith. So when they were having a hard time in life, they would inevitably want to see God or other gods to obtain salvation and eternal bliss and happiness. Compared to the world described in religion, life now was terrible. So to prevent believers from being impulsive, all Orthodox religions would prohibit believers from committing suicide in their teachings. They claimed that believers who committed suicide would not only not obtain bliss, but would also suffer for eternity. But evil cults never cared about this. So people in evil cults were crazy and not afraid of death. Because they were not afraid of death, and they even wanted to die earlier. In Bane's opinion, this was the biggest difference between Orthodox religions and evil cults. Now that Jilin advocated suicide so much, the Red Dragon sect was undoubtedly an evil cult. A god of an evil cult like you. Don't touch Staya with your hands. Put her down. Jilin shrugged. Then you have to tell me where the coffin she brought is. Chapter 404. Even though Jilin was discussing the matter as it was, when it entered Bane's ears, it became ridicule that didn't care at all. Give her to me. No. Jilin shook his head. Why? Staya's armor seems to be too heavy for you. Bane could not bear to listen to this anymore. In his eyes, Jilin was one of the culprits who killed Staya. Bane flipped over and stood up, bringing up a large amount of snow. He lowered his center of gravity and rushed towards Jilin, like an arrow sticking close to the ground. Bang! Jilin casually lifted his foot, and Bane sat back down. Cough, cough, cough. Bane leaned against the wall. He felt a sharp pain in his back. He felt like his internal organs had shifted. Why didn't you kick me to death? Bane stared at Jilin fiercely. For you, it would take a lot of energy to not kick me to death, right? Didn't you think that I wouldn't kick you to death? That's why you rushed towards me? Jilin said calmly. Bane was silent because Jilin's words hit the nail on the head, making people tremble with fear. Just as Jilin said, even if Bane was furious and hysterical, he still felt that Jilin would not kill him. That was why he dared to follow his impulse and rush towards Jilin. Don't waste any more time. Put Staya in the coffin first. Then you will have time to slowly accept this reality. Now, tell me, where's the coffin? How would I know? Bane panicked. I just got here. Why would I want to know where it is? Am I looking forward to Staya's death? Is that so? Jilin said. Bane paused. He did not understand what this sentence meant. Before he could react, he heard Jilin continue. Then who knows? I know. The gentle voice made both Jilin and Bane pause. The two people looked at each other. There seemed to be something between the two of them that did not need to be said. Bane seemed to have forgotten that Jilin had just kicked him. Jilin also suddenly forgot about Bane's unreasonable abuse. Is that so? Where is it? Jilin turned around and looked at the third prince, who was wearing a golden dragon robe, and asked with a smile. The third young master's yellow robe was still dazzling under the Snow Wind Empire's not-so-strong sunlight. The golden light was so dazzling that it was dazzling. Anyone who saw this scene would praise him from the bottom of their heart. He is indeed the emperor of the human race. Where's the coffin? It's in the Wind Moon City. You're taking me there? Of course, Brother Long, please. The third prince gestured with his hand. Jilin nodded and followed behind the third young master as they walked towards the interior of Wind Moon City. Tap, tap, tap. A clear sound of footsteps echoed in the Wind Moon City's inner passageway. It was the sound of the third prince's footsteps. The golden boots in the yellow robe made a crisp sound against the black stone floor. And behind the third prince, there were two people, Bane and Jilin. Bane was originally a thief. Wearing special soft-soled shoes that could hide the sound of his footsteps was simply a habit engraved in Bane's bones. Only now did Bane and the third prince discover that Jilin's footsteps were also silent. This passageway in the Wind Moon City was very long. The entire passageway was built with black stones. On both sides of the passageway, there was a lamp every 15 steps to illuminate the passageway. There was not a single person in the long passageway, making the passageway look hidden and gloomy. This building was very much in the style of the Snow Wind Empire. The path that the third prince was taking with Jilin was the only path in the Snow Wind Empire that could lead to the Wind Moon City's rooftop. It had a very important position in the culture of the Snow Wind Empire. Although there was no need to guard it on normal days, it was certainly not as empty as it was now. This was because the third prince knew that Jilin wanted to take this path, so he urgently discussed with the Iron Blood King to clear this path. Brother Long, it's really been a long time, the third prince suddenly said as he walked. He didn't know if it was because of the dead silence in the passageway. Jilin ignored him. The last time he saw the third prince was 2 years ago, when the third prince led the humans to fight him. 2 years was not a long time for him or the third prince. In other words, they had just finished fighting. Actually, I always felt that, Brother Long. You didn't die, the third prince said again. Jilin still didn't pay any attention to him because this was nonsense. Although Jilin agreed to Staya's proposal 2 years ago in order to get things done once and for all. But Jilin never thought that he could deceive the third prince. The third prince saw that Jilin was still ignoring him and finally sighed and gave up the idea of livening up the atmosphere. The third prince led Bane and Jilin through the passageways of the Wind Moon City and walked for a long distance. It was hard to understand how an emperor of the Middle Empire could be so familiar with the secret passageways of the Snow Wind Empire. Finally, under a suffocating and oppressive atmosphere, the third prince finally led Jilin to a huge stone room. The stone room was 400 to 500 meters in size and was circular in shape. There was almost nothing inside. There was only a thick and heavy white stone coffin placed in the center. On the dome of the room, there were a few white lights that sprinkled a gentle and quiet white light on this huge stone room, just like the gentle moon. The scene in front of him made Jilin's heart tighten. He suddenly thought of a human term that was both sacred and evil. It was a group activity unique to humans. Sacrifice. This huge circular stone room looked like a circular altar. The stone room was empty. That was natural. There shouldn't be anything meaningless on the altar. There should only be one thing on it. Sacrifice. Although the word sacrifice sounded broad, it wasn't the case. Humans should be everywhere and have a rich imagination. But for some reason, it suddenly became scarce and barren here. In the long history of humans, there were only two options for the sacrifice that humans offered to the gods: food or young girls. This was the humans' obsession with the word young girls. Humans believed that only young girls were pure enough to be the humans' gift to the gods. No matter what humans thought, Jilin was sure that the gods wouldn't want this kind of gift from humans. Therefore, most of the food offered to the gods would quietly rot, and a few would be secretly eaten by greedy children or poor people. As for the young girls offered to the gods, there was no clear record of their whereabouts in any of the human history books. They could have run away, or they could have died. So that's how it is. Jilin looked at the stone coffin that looked like a sacrifice and said softly. It turned out that the cruel and ignorant habits of humans had never been cut off. They had only been passed down in a vague manner. After thousands of years, humans seemed to be changing with each passing day. They had already been reborn, but in some aspects, their stubbornness made Jilin gasp in amazement. Even if thousands of years had passed, it wouldn't change the slightest. But this time, was the human sacrifice Staya? Chapter 405. Jilin looked at the white sarcophagus and whispered, but he was interrupted by the third prince. This was originally a place used by the Snow Wind Empire to store treasures and other important things. Until a few days ago, when the Iron Blood King knew that the Holy Queen would bring a coffin, he specially ordered people to empty this place to store the Holy Queen's coffin alone. It was to show the Snow Wind Empire's respect to the Holy Queen and the Church of Light. So I thought it was just a superficial effort to boost morale, but I didn't expect that it would actually be used. Jilin was stunned when he heard this. He actually misunderstood. Just based on a similar placement and layout, he actually thought of the human sacrifice. Jilin was very surprised because in his mind, only humans would do such a stupid thing. What's wrong? Even Bane almost noticed Jilin's surprise. Jilin glanced at him and finally saw his abnormality. Jilin suddenly realized that ever since he confirmed Staya's death, he had suddenly become sentimental. Nothing, I just feel that the location of the coffin is not very good. Jilin said. The location is not good? The third prince looked at Jilin strangely. In the third prince's impression, Brother Long was not a dragon who would care about this kind of thing. Moreover, although the third prince downplayed it, the Iron Blood King also used a lot of manpower and material resources to be able to vacate this extraordinary stone room. To be honest, even in the eyes of the third young master, wanting to find a better place to place the coffin in Wind Moon City than this was not an easy task. After all, this was the coffin of the king of a country, and a slight mistake would be extremely rude. For this reason, the Iron Blood King specially asked people to consult the entourage of the Middle Empire and asked the people of the Middle Empire to provide advice. After all, in terms of feng shui, the Middle Empire could be said to be the best in the world, and no one was unconvinced. No matter how you look at it, this location is excellent. Could it be that Brother Long has some unique views? The third prince said strangely. He also dabbled in the feng shui of the Middle Empire, and also did not feel that there was anything wrong with this place. But since Jilin said so, there might really be something that he missed. After all, dragons were high-level creatures. It was normal for them to know some knowledge that humans did not know. No. Jilin's straightforward answer stunned the third prince. Then the third could not help but bitterly smile. I just feel uncomfortable looking at it. After Jilin finished speaking, he carried Staya and walked towards the coffin. Tap, tap, tap. For some reason, at this time, suddenly, Jilin was Lin's. But neither the third prince nor Bane noticed this. Jilin walked to the white coffin step by step with Staya in his arms. He suddenly had a very bad feeling. He felt like he was a human who was holding a sacrifice to the gods. Jilin walked around the coffin with Staya in his arms. He wanted to show Staya her new home forever, even if it was meaningless. After walking around, Jilin was also inspecting Staya's new home. Jilin nodded with satisfaction. Staya did not say anything. One end of the coffin was big, while the other end was small. The whole coffin was trapezoidal. The lid of the coffin was carved by a skillful sculptor, who carved an extremely exquisite statue of the god of light the size of a person. At the front of the coffin, there was a church that was hidden by the forest. In front of the church, there was a grassland full of strange plants. On both sides, there were tall pine trees. The entire church looked very quiet, as if it was the residence of the gods in the heavens. On the left side, there was a phoenix that was burning with flames. She was extremely huge, and there were countless birds and beasts running under her wings. On the right side, there were trees, mountains, and rivers. It looked like a landscape painting. Only the back of the coffin was empty. Jilin gently kicked open the coffin. Boom! The heavy stone slab that was almost 2 fists thick slid to the ground and made a loud noise. It should have been something that 4 or 5 people could barely move with the help of tools. Of course, the heavy stone slab and the light wooden planks did not make much difference to Jilin. Jilin gently put Staya into the coffin. He simply adjusted her posture and let Staya's hands cross over her lower abdomen. Staya, who had just soaked in the spring of life, was still glowing. She looked no different from when she was alive. Jilin nodded with satisfaction. Then, he picked up the coffin lid with one hand and meticulously closed it. Bane looked at Jilin's actions. He wanted to say something, but stopped. Because according to the rules of the Saimai Empire, closing the coffin for the Saintess required a grand occasion. There needed to be 9 bishops standing around and praying together. But Bane thought about it and did not say anything in the end. Jilin gently pushed the coffin lid. The coffin that weighed a few thousand pounds was pushed, but the coffin lid and the coffin were still tightly closed. Jilin confirmed that the lid was closed. He lifted the coffin on one of his shoulders and walked out step by step. Ka. The heavy coffin pressed down on Jilin's shoulders. This weight was nothing to Jilin, but the stone ground that the Snow Wind Empire had painstakingly built could not bear it. With every step Jilin took, he would leave a deep and clear footprint behind him. Bane and the third prince sucked in a breath of cold air. They were incomparably shocked. What are you doing? Bane flashed in front of Jilin and even pulled out his sword. Jilin did not even look at him. With a light wave of his hand, the sword broke and Bane was sent flying. Bane fiercely hit the wall beside him. He was unable to get up for a while. He felt as if he had been punched by a 6th-rank powerhouse with all his strength. Brother Long, I understand your feelings, but this is indeed inappropriate. The third prince replaced Bane's position. Jilin's golden pupils slightly lit up. A rich dragon's aura began to spread out. In the end, he could not treat the third prince as casually as he treated Bane. The third prince's heart sank. He was suddenly in a dilemma. If he fought with Jilin here, regardless of whether he won or lost, it would definitely cause a great loss to the human race. The war between the humans was imminent. Their strength was not at its peak. This kind of loss was unbearable now. However, he could not allow Brother Long to take Staya away. I wanted to ask you this when I saw you. Jilin said, You're the Emperor. Then why did Staya rush out first when you faced the Demon King? Realization dawned on the third young master. He was still wondering why Brother Long did not say anything when he saw him. He thought that Brother Long was still holding a grudge against him for leading the human race to attack the volcano 2 years ago. It turned out that Brother Long was angry at him for Staya's death. The third prince felt bitter in his mouth. He was really wronged, but could not say anything. When Staya rushed out, she swore that she could even take down the Red Disaster. So, taking down the Demon King was not a problem. She even asked the third prince not to steal her credit. At that time, the third prince was also skeptical. After all, he had some estimation of Staya's strength. However, he did not know the Demon King's strength. What if the Demon King was really not that powerful? Besides, who would think that someone like Staya would lie? Everything she said was so infectious and convincing. Just as the third prince was hesitating, Staya had already rushed out. The third prince looked at Jilin. He wanted to say a lot of things, but he could not say a single word, because Staya was already dead. Chapter 406. The third prince suddenly realized that a person's death could make so many things lose their meaning in an instant. Brother Long, where do you want to take Staya? The third prince asked bitterly. It's none of your business. Jilin obviously didn't want to tell him. The Saintess of Light should be respected by thousands of people after her death, and she should also be worshipped after her death. You can't find a place where no one can find her and bury her. Those things don't mean anything to the dead. Jilin's tone suddenly became extremely cold. What the living should give to the dead is respect and tranquility, instead of countless living people surrounding her tombstone and sighing. If you insist on doing this, then just set up a tall monument for her in a crowded place. There's no need to use Staya's body. This will make it easier for more people to worship her, right? Brother Long, you don't trust us? The third prince hesitated and said, I've read a lot of books. I know that the dead should be respected. Of course. Jilin nodded. Of course, he knew that the third prince had read a lot of books, but that didn't mean anything. From the history of you humans, most of the scum that can really bring disaster to the country, and the people were also well-educated. Having read a lot of books didn't mean that one's character was good. On the contrary, the words that scholars use to describe farmers are often simple, kind, and so on. The third prince was speechless because he suddenly felt that what Jilin said made a lot of sense. Among the greedy rebels of the Middle Empire, which one of them wasn't well-educated? Of course, if they weren't well-educated, they wouldn't have done such a big thing. As the royal family of the Middle Empire, that's enough. The royal family name isn't something to be proud of. It's not worth showing off. Jilin raised his hand and interrupted the third prince. Where did this come from? The third prince was at a loss. The change of power and the change of dynasties are all accomplished through military force. The establishment of an empire is often equivalent to replacing the previous one. The Middle Empire should be the same, right? Third young master nodded. It was indeed so. Although the third prince was extremely rebellious when he was young, he was still very familiar with the history of his family. In other words, there was no one in the Middle Empire who wasn't familiar with his family's history. Regarding the history of the the Leaf family's own saying was that they were born with the times and became heroes by nature. They shouldered the great responsibility of saving the people from calamity. No matter what, maybe you think you're righteous from the bottom of your hearts. But to the previous empire, you are traitors. Jilin said, since countless years ago, all the emperors in this world have the bloodline of the rebels. What true son of heaven? They're all traitors. What's there to show off? The third prince looked at Jilin. His face was flushed red, turning into the color of pig liver. Since young, the third prince had never heard such words. Even he himself didn't like the Leaf family. He felt that the palace was full of disputes, and even Chun Feng Lu was several times cleaner than it. But really, no one had ever said such things about the Leaf family's bloodline. Moreover, it was said so harshly. If the people of the Middle Empire said such things, and it fell into the ears of those in power, it would be a crime for them to be beheaded at the very least. These were words that could shake the foundation of the empire. The third prince reckoned that if someone wanted to rebel or something, they would definitely use Jilin's words as a gimmick. In the time it took to say a few words, Jilin had already carried the sarcophagus and walked in front of the third prince. The third prince stubbornly looked at Jilin and stared at him. He had nothing else to say. He could only stiffly block in front of him. The golden light in Jilin's eyes shone brightly. He stepped back and punched. A surge of dragon might mixed with endless domineering aura suddenly surged. It was as if the calm sea had suddenly become stormy. The third prince narrowed his eyes with a heavy expression. He didn't dare to be careless. It was obvious that it was Muzin's Emperor's Fist. It was estimated that after the death of King of Fighters Muzin, only Jilin could use the Emperor's Fist with such a pure fist intent. It was really ironic. The third prince condensed the power of the human emperor and condensed it into a whirlpool in front of him that kept spinning. He wanted to use this to dissolve Jilin's unparalleled fist force. As soon as Jilin's fist entered the whirlpool, he felt that his fist force was constantly entangled and consumed, reducing layer by layer. This punch was actually taken by the third prince. 2 years had passed. The third prince's use of the power of the human emperor had obviously reached a higher level. But this was also within Jilin's expectations. So, Jilin didn't just use one punch. Jilin used the fist technique that the king of fighters Musin was proud of. The mountain quaking fist. The name sounded impressive, but it was actually a series of punches. However, every time the king of fighters punched, his fist intent and aura would increase greatly. According to the king of fighters' thoughts, this set of fist techniques could really flatten mountains in the end. But unfortunately, the king of fighters' opponents wouldn't let him punch so many times without his fist intent continuing. They would usually dodge and interrupt the king of fighters' fist intent. Even the orcs wouldn't choose to take Musin's fist head-on. Speaking of which, the king of fighters' mountain quaking fist had thrown the most punches when he fought with Jilin in the Snow Wind Empire. He had thrown more than 130 punches. That time, Jilin stood still and fought with him. He didn't dodge or defend. Jilin and Musin fought each other. At least, that was what it looked like. If the Pope wasn't there, Musin would have been beaten to death by Jilin. From then on, Jilin learned this fist technique that got stronger the more he fought. The passage was narrow, and there weren't many places where the third prince could move. Jilin forced the third prince into a corner with a few punches, leaving him with nowhere to hide. Then he smashed his punches down. The biggest advantage of this fist technique for Jilin was not that it got stronger the more he fought, but that it was easy to control. The power of his punches gradually increased. As long as the third prince could withstand the first punch, Jilin didn't have to worry about accidentally killing him with one punch. Finally, when Jilin landed his 13th punch, the shield in front of the third prince shattered. The third prince fell weakly against the wall and looked at Jilin weakly. "You dare to stand in front of me now? When the Demon King came, why didn't you stand in front of her?" Jilin said softly. The third prince was silent for a moment. "Because I hesitated. Why? I'm now the strongest person of a human race. I'm the human emperor. I can't easily fight a battle that I'm not sure of winning. Once I lose, it will be a heavy blow to the entire human race. I can't afford to lose." Jilin looked at the third prince, and the light in his eyes seemed to contain a different meaning. How could this be the words of the third prince? What kind of person was he when he was in Spring Breeze restaurant? At that time, the third prince stood elegantly in front of the carved window of Spring Breeze restaurant with wine in his hand. His lazy eyes seemed to be looking at the young and beautiful women on the street, but in fact he was only looking at the one in the cloth store. At that time, even Jilin thought that he was really a fine young master, a lotus flower that grew out of a pool of mud. Back then, the third young master had lived such a carefree and unrestrained life. He had been so self-centered. If he had heard what he said today, he would have snorted disdainfully. "You've really changed. You've become a completely different person." Yes, the third prince didn't deny it. "Now I know that the greatest ability of the emperor is not to command the world, but to change the person above it. So, most of the emperors of the past are similar. Do you regret it? Not bad, not really. What about your ambition at that time? I still remember it. It's just that the empire has fought too many wars these years. I didn't have the time." Chapter 407. The third prince was very depressed. He knew that he would lose, but he didn't think that he would lose so directly and so naturally. He had almost no chance to fight back. This time, he lost faster than before when he fought with Jilin. The third prince thought that he was stronger than 2 years ago. But why? Could it be that Brother Long will also become stronger? Many things change as you do them. I thought that you would be an exception, but clearly you are not. Jilin looked at the third prince and said. Jilin's eyes dimmed slightly, his eyelids drooping. This appearance made the third prince dazed for a moment. If this expression appeared on human's face, it would be easy to recognize and make them look disappointed. But when it appeared on Jilin's face, the third prince couldn't understand. The third prince only felt uncomfortable in his chest, as if a fishbone was stuck in his throat. "I won't forget," the third prince said loudly. Jilin looked at him indifferently, without any change in his expression, because Jilin knew that words like these were not worth believing. Humans were unable to guarantee the future at all, but they were confident in the future and would always make promises without thinking. "How many women do you have right now?" Jilin suddenly asked. The third prince stilled and looked at Jilin in surprise. He looked at Jilin, but he was dazed. He suddenly remembered what Staya had said to him that day on that famous observation deck. Don't forget, I wasn't the only matchmaker between you and Miss Xueqing. Jilin and Aisha also gave ideas. The third prince suddenly felt a chill run up his spine. He shivered violently. That was his illusion. As the human emperor, he was supported by the luck of the entire human race. No chill could invade his body. He only realized one thing in hindsight. It turned out that Stee was already prepared to die at that time. She knew that she was going to die and couldn't complete the important task of supervising him to be good to Xueqing. That was why she had reminded him so casually without leaving a trace. She wasn't the only matchmaker. There were also Jilin and Aisha. When he heard it, the third prince didn't think much of it. It was just a very normal sentence. But now that he thought about it, wasn't Staya saying, even if I die, you can't bully Xueqing because someone will watch over you for me? It turned out that all of this was within her expectations. At that time, the Demon King hadn't suddenly appeared, and no one knew how strong the Demon King was. But Staya had predicted it. She had anticipated everything that was about to happen. She even predicted her own death. But at that time, she still rushed Overziz had no hesitation. So much so that third young master only hesitated for a moment before he failed to stop her. Why? Staya's actions were almost considered suicide. How could a saint of light commit suicide? Even if the third prince hadn't read the Holy Bible of Light, he still knew that suicide was a taboo in the Church of Light. Moreover, Staya wasn't the kind of coward who would easily give up her life. She was so determined to die, as if she was willing to sacrifice her life. She must have a purpose. The Holy Queen was willing to sacrifice herself. She must have done it for something. What was worth it for her to do this? She must have used her life to exchange for something. But what was the problem? The third prince suddenly fell into deep thought. He even forgot to answer Jilin's question. When did Jilin receive such treatment? He grabbed third young master's neck and pressed him against the wall, lifting him up. I'm asking you, how many women do you have now? The third prince's feet were off the ground. Although he wouldn't suffocate to death with his strength, he wouldn't feel good either. The third prince only felt that it was difficult to breathe. He instantly came back to his senses. The first thing he saw was Jilin's golden eyes. The third prince had never looked at Jilin's eyes so closely. He didn't dare to do it before, but now he had no choice. Now, the third prince's strength was also very high, and his eyesight was very good. He could see small details that normal people couldn't. He used to think that Jilin's eyes were the same as a human's when he was in human form, only the color was different. But at such a close distance, the third prince could see that there were extremely small, scale-like patterns on Jilin's eyeballs. But this wasn't what attracted the third prince's attention the most. What caught the third prince's attention the most was that there was a thin layer of hazy liquid in Jilin's eyes. This layer of liquid had just appeared, but it was instantly evaporated into nothingness by the extremely high temperature of the eyeballs. It didn't even have the chance to turn into white smoke. Third young master's heart trembled. So, Brother Long had been crying since some time ago. Jilin actually cried. The third prince didn't know what it meant for a dragon to cry, but he subconsciously brought the meaning of a human's tears to Jilin. In that instant, the third young master seemed to understand the reason behind Staya's death. He understood why he lost so easily this time. Even a disaster would cry for the fall of a holy person. These artistic and pretentious words appeared in the third prince's mind like a gift from the heavens. The third prince shivered. Staya, I'm asking you a question. Jilin was angry, and he slightly tightened his grip. He asked twice, but the third prince ignored him. Jilin, had never seen such a powerful human. Was the human emperor that powerful? Don't you know that I'm still holding your neck in my hand? If I use more force, you'll be gone. Just one. The third prince reacted and hurriedly said, Brother Long, as long as you're alive, how dare I not thank Xueqing? No. One is best. Jilin snorted and then suddenly asked, What did you see just now? The third prince was stunned at first, and then his hair stood on end. A huge sense of danger shrouded the third prince's heart. He didn't dare to say that he saw him cry, although he really wanted to say that. But he was really afraid of angering Jilin, but he didn't know what to say to change the topic. The third prince reluctantly turned his head and glanced at Brother Bay, only to find that Brother Bay had fainted after being hit by Brother Long's hand. President Long, Aisha didn't hit him so hard. It should be that Brother Bay couldn't accept the impact of the fact, and then he fainted after being hit by Brother Long. However, the third prince saw the black dagger beside Bane, and his eyes suddenly turned, and he became addicted. That, nothing. The third prince hurriedly said, "Right, there's one more thing. I forgot to tell Brother Long. Now that I think about it, I really shouldn't." Jilin looked at the third prince, waiting for him to continue. 2 years ago, thanks to Brother Long and the matchmakers, Shueching and I had a son. Logically speaking, I should give a matchmakers a red packet, but there were too many things, and I actually forgot. I'll make it up to Brother Long. The third prince took out a fist-sized gold ingot from his sleeve and handed it to Jilin. Chapter 408. Jilin put down the third prince and subconsciously took the ingot. "You already have a child, yes?" The third prince smiled. "After humans get married, they should have children." "Brother Long, why are you so surprised?" "What's his name?" "Li Wuyo." "Who named him?" "Me. I'm not like my father, who has to ask the current prime minister for help to name his child. That's simple and straightforward." The third prince sighed in his heart, thinking that nothing was simple and straightforward in the royal family. This child will sit in my position in the future. If he has no worries, the Middle Empire will be prosperous and the people will be at peace. Jilin nodded. "How do you know that he will sit in your position?" "Because he is my eldest prince, and the empress gave birth to him. I remember that you call yourself the third prince. I will only have one prince." "Why?" "Because Shueching decided not to have another child after she gave birth to another daughter last year." "You humans, why don't you have children?" "Because it hurts too much." "That's true." The third prince suddenly looked at Jilin with a smile as warm as the spring breeze. He elegantly extended his hand to Jilin. The third prince's intention was clear. Jilin narrowed his eyes and pretended that he didn't know. He put the ingot into his small world without a trace. "What do you mean?" "Brother Long, what are you talking about?" Third young master pretended to be very surprised. "You and I have a very close relationship. We can be considered friends who have gone through life and death together. Plus, you're my matchmaker. With this kind of relationship, it's natural for my child to recognize you as his foster father in the Central Empire. Now that the child has been born for 2 years, why don't you, as his uncle, express anything? Didn't the Holy Virgin teach you?" Jilin was stunned. Staya rarely taught him words like express that were full of Philistine taste. "What do you mean by expression?" The third prince was speechless. 2 years ago, my first prince, Li Wuyo, was born. It was a time of war, so we didn't do much. However, even though the Saint of Light was far away in the Saimai Empire at that time, and was extremely busy, she still took time out of her busy schedule to have someone send a holy grimoire of light over as a congratulatory gift. Later on, Brother Bay also gave him a child toy that he made himself. He was very attentive. Even Lady Aisha, whose victory is unknown, sent a protective talisman over with a crow. The third prince looked at Jilin expectantly, but Jilin didn't buy it at all. "Although you've changed a lot, you're still as shameless as before. 2 years ago, you brought the entire human race to fight against me, and you even asked the Elf Queen to plot against me. It's not too much to say that we're mortal enemies. If you say that we're mortal friends, then there's no problem. Under such circumstances, why should I give you a gift?" "Brother Long, that's not right." The third prince shook his head exaggeratedly. His smug look made Jilin really want to punch him in the face. "Adults' affairs have nothing to do with children. Even if we really become mortal enemies, Wuyo still has to call you uncle when he sees you, right? You have to give him what he deserves. You actually want to take something from me? I think you're crazy." Jilin finally gave up his act impatiently. It was always Jilin who took someone else's share. When had he ever taken anything from him? He had a golden mountain, but he didn't even pay for his meals. It was always Staya and Aisha who paid. Brother Long, Shu Etching's memory of you is still fresh. The third prince sighed. You're so stingy now. If you see Shu Etching or your child in the future, I can't imagine how you, the great red calamity, will raise your head. Jilin's face darkened, and it was as cold as the water in the cave. Jilin searched all over his body and suddenly realized that he didn't have anything to give. Jilin thought for a moment, pulled out a strand of hair from his head, and held it in his hand. Then, he handed it to the third prince. When the third prince got the hair, the red hair had already become a few meters long. That was its original appearance. Originally, according to the dragon race's rules, I can't give you this, but the divinity in this hair has been completely refined by me. It's just a slightly sturdy, ordinary object. It can't be considered a real dragon's hair, so there's no problem. The third prince was stunned. Jilin's gift was a little too big. The third prince didn't expect that he would get such a big surprise just to change the topic. This was the hair of the red calamity. Although it didn't have much divinity, it was just right. Otherwise, how could a human use a strand of hair that had an extremely high temperature, could cut iron like mud, and was extremely tough? Brother Long, how can I accept this? The third prince hurriedly took it and put it away carefully. Then he looked up at Jilin. Brother Long, did you forget? I just said that I have a daughter. Jilin's face darkened. However, he was in a bad mood today, so he didn't want to be entangled with the third prince. He pulled out another strand of hair in a bad mood. What's the girl's name? Li Wuyu. What a good name. Of course. I'm leaving. Don't stop me. Jilin looked at the third prince and said, I'll tell you the location of Staya's tomb. I know that humans have a habit of worshipping the dead. The third prince was silent for a moment. He was still sitting on the ground. At this moment, he lowered his head in shame and didn't dare to look into Jilin's eyes. Brother Long, I'm sorry. This wasn't my intention, but when I really sat on the throne, I understood that sometimes people don't do things because they want to, but because their position forced them to do so. I'm sorry. Humans are intelligent creatures, after all. Since you already know that you're burdened by your position, why don't you kick it away and enjoy yourself? Human life is so short. You should enjoy it while you can. You can't always force yourself to do things that you don't want to do. The third prince still had his head lowered. He didn't want to talk about this with Jilin. In the eyes of humans, the things that Jilin mentioned were called responsibilities and work. No one could kick them away. Jilin's heart was very heavy. He said this for the third prince, but he also said it for himself. Not doing things that you don't want to do sounded cool and free, but it wasn't that easy. Even Jilin was the same. Brother Long, I'm sorry. The third prince lowered his head again and said in a low voice. As the third prince finished, a group of white figures walked out from the darkness at both ends of the tunnel. The tunnel was very narrow, so there were a lot of them. They filled up the tunnel. There were even more people deep in the darkness. After the third prince lost, he chatted with Jilin about his family's affairs and asked for Jilin's gift for his child. In fact, it was all to stall for time. He was waiting. He was waiting for the people from the Church of Light to come. He wanted these people to leave Brother Long and Staya's coffin behind. He knew that no matter how many of these people there were, they were no match for Jilin. They couldn't stop him. As long as Jilin wanted to, he could completely ignore these people from the Church of Light and walk out normally. Anyone who stood in his way would be crushed to death. It wasn't that Jilin killed them, but that they were blocking Jilin's path, and Jilin didn't have to try to avoid them. They were like ants that stopped in the path of humans. In front of Jilin, these people were really like ants that couldn't be seen if he didn't pay attention. But the third prince didn't believe that today, when Staya had just died, Jilin could be so cruel as to carry Staya's coffin and kill the people from the Church of Light. Chapter 409. Jilin looked to the left, then to the right. TSK. Sigh. Jilin clicked his tongue and let out a heavy sigh. As if he saw something troublesome, he couldn't muster up any strength. Okay. Jilin lowered his head and looked at the third prince. His eyes became very playful. Although I knew you weren't a gentleman at the beginning, I didn't expect you to play so dirty now. Is it because of that throne? Maybe. The third prince didn't deny it, because in his heart, he knew that this method was too despicable. It was not in line with the way the Golden King of the Middle Empire did, nor was it in line with the style of the human emperor. Even those who had read 2 or 3 books wouldn't be able to do such a thing, but this was what the emperor did. Knowing that you couldn't do anything to the people of the Church of Light, they sent them to block your way and make you have scruples. This was called restraint. Every emperor was good at this. Do you know that they might die? Qi Lin's gaze towards third young master suddenly turned gloomy and cold, just like the gaze of a snake that had locked onto its prey, cold and sharp. The third prince lowered his head and didn't speak. Of course, he knew. He was just betting. He was betting that Jilin wouldn't kill the people of the Church of Light in this world. But he had to make sure that the temperamental Jilin's mood wouldn't suddenly become good or bad at this time. He was gambling with those people's lives, gambling with an unequal bet, and he wasn't sure if he would win. If he won, Jilin would leave Staya behind. If he lost, hundreds of people of the Church of Light would die again. Jilin suddenly sneered disdainfully. You finally became a real emperor. Jilin didn't understand. Obviously, humans had the saying, it's easy to change mountains and rivers, but it's hard to change one's nature. Why would they be affected by power and have such a drastic change? The greater the power, the greater the change in people. Even the purest and kindest human beings would become incomparably cold and cruel under the influence of supreme power. They would become crueler than any beast in the world. In a world that only Jilin knew, there were countless examples that prove this. The kind old man, Ji Chong, who was originally known for his benevolence and love for his people, suddenly became arrogant when he decided to rebel. He ate his son's flesh without any change in his expression, smoothly returned to his own territory, and started the great cause of Zhou. For the sake of the stability of the empire, Qin Shi Huang threw 2 of his half-brothers to death and imprisoned his birth mother. For this reason, he killed more than 20 people who tried to persuade him. During the battle between Liu Bang and Xiang Yu captured Liu Bang's father to force him to surrender. However, not only did Liu Bang refuse, he even said that he wanted a share of the loot. Chao Ziziz's immediately Liu SSS. Liu Bei threw Ah Do in front of Zilong. Sun Quan married his sister to Liu Bei, who was from his father's generation. Song Taizong's, Li Shimin's Xuanwu's. These people were the most outstanding among the emperors of the past. What they did shouldn't be considered as something that a human could do. The human's heart was corrupted by the supreme power. Other than the appearance of a human, there was nothing else that resembled a human. However, it wasn't surprising that the third prince became like this today. Jilin had thought of this possibility when he helped the third prince ascend the throne. However, at that time, he felt lucky and thought that the third prince would be an exception. He was such a good person back then. Although he was always fooling around in the brothel, it was still better than now. Red Disaster put down the holy coffin. The sudden voice made Jilin pause and turn his head to look in that direction. He wanted to refute and say that he wasn't holding the holy coffin, but Staya. This was a box made of stone. If Staya hadn't shown a rare obsession with it, Jilin wouldn't have taken a fancy to it. If it was made of pure gold, he might have considered it. However, his disappointment in the third prince defeated Jilin. He was now a little disheartened and was too lazy to talk to those humans. Jilin not speaking was a normal thing for those who were familiar with him. However, to the people of the Church of Light, this meant that the Red Disaster was ignoring them. This wasn't out of their expectations. The Red Disaster was a disaster for humans. He was in existence on the level of a natural disaster, like a storm or a flood. He had brought untold suffering to the human race. He even made the Church of Light think that he was an emissary sent down by God to punish humans. Wasn't it natural for such an existence to ignore them? Since they already expected it, they naturally had a countermeasure. However, Jilin came suddenly, so the Church of Light's response was also very rushed and blunt. The people on both sides began to walk towards the middle together. They approached Jilin step by step, as if they were walking towards an endless abyss. The only thing they could do was to walk more in unison to make them look more imposing. They were ready to show the Red Disaster that they were not afraid of death at all, even if he didn't care. However, they had already made up their minds to keep the holy coffin at all costs, even though they knew that even if they gave up everything, they might not be able to keep it. With so many people, even if there were two high-level masters, none of them were in the legendary realm. So why would Jilin care? Jilin still looked at the third prince. It's not too late to stop now. Although the third prince was in a heavy mood, he couldn't help but laugh when he heard Jilin's words. Jilin's words made it sound like he was the bad guy who was about to do something bad, and he was the righteous emissary who had the absolute advantage. What's so funny? I've been rude. The third prince shook his head and laughed. It's just that I really didn't expect that one day these words would come out of Brother Long's mouth. Jilin blinked and pointed at the believers of the Church of Light who were still walking towards the middle. If they all die, do you think it's me or you who kill them? The third prince was silent for a moment. You and I each take half, haha. Jilin also laughed. When we were in Spring Breeze restaurant, I didn't expect you to say such things. Me killing people is in accordance with the heavenly Tao and nature, but what about you? What right do you have to bear so many lives? I'm the human emperor, the third prince said. I bear all the sins and darkness of the human race. You bear the sins and don't have to die, but they might not. So many lives in exchange for a body, a coffin, is it worth it? They think it's worth it. The third prince glanced at the people of the Church of Light. They were not afraid of death. Idiots, Jilin said. These humans were actually betting their chances of winning on his soft-heartedness. What was the difference between this and not running away when you met a tiger and even hoping that the tiger wouldn't eat meat? This was an insult to the tiger. Jilin decided to teach these people a lesson. The third prince felt that he couldn't do anything to the people of the Church of Light just because he was carrying Staia's coffin. This was looking down on him. He had to let the third prince know what a dragon was. Not only would he kill these people, he would also smash them into pieces with Staia's coffin. After all, this coffin was much stronger than a person. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.